In all of human history, there are few stories more dramatic than that of Queen Esther, a story so incredible that if it were fiction, you'd say it was too far-fetched to believe. Picture this. A young orphan girl becomes queen of the most powerful empire on earth, only to discover that her own husband has unknowingly signed a law that will result in the genocide of her people. But here's the twist that will leave you speechless. She had been chosen for the throne for this exact moment, though she didn't know it yet. Today, we're diving deep into every detail of Esther's incredible journey from orphan to queen to the savior of an entire nation. But before we dive in, if you're new to this channel, consider hitting that like and subscribe button if this type of content helps you unwind. Also, let us know where you're watching from and what time it is. We'd love to hear from you. So without further ado, let's get started, shall we? In the heart of ancient Persia, where golden palaces touched the sky and power flowed like rivers through marble halls, a secret was about to change the world. Deep within the royal courts of Susa, a young woman walked among princes and nobles, her face serene, her steps measured. She wore silk and jewels, ate from golden plates, and slept in chambers fit for gods. Yet beneath her crown lay a truth so dangerous it could cost her life. The year was around 480 BC. The Persian Empire stretched from India to Ethiopia, commanding over 100 million souls across 3 continents. King Xerxes ruled this vast realm with absolute power, his word becoming law across deserts, mountains, and seas. In his palace, luxury knew no bounds. Servants numbered in thousands, gardens bloomed with flowers from distant lands, and treasures filled countless rooms. But empires built on fear carry seeds of their own destruction. In the shadows of this golden age, hatred was growing. A plan was forming that would sweep across the kingdom like wildfire, targeting an entire people for extinction. The Jewish communities scattered throughout Persia had no idea that their days were numbered, that a decree would soon be written in blood and sealed with the royal ring. Queen Esther moved through her daily rituals, attending court ceremonies and royal feasts, her true identity hidden even from her husband, the king. She had been chosen from thousands of beautiful women, elevated from nothing to everything. Yet she carried within her heart the faith of her ancestors and the love of her people. Few knew that this Persian queen was born a Jewish orphan, raised by her cousin Mordecai in the streets of Susa. The stage was set for a collision between good and evil, between the powerful and the powerless. In the coming days, Esther would face an impossible choice. She could remain silent and safe, living her royal life while her people perished. Or she could risk everything, knowing that to reveal her secret might mean death, but also knowing that sometimes one person can change the course of history. The golden scepter of the king would soon decide the fate of nations. A young woman's courage would be tested against the machinery of empire. And in the shadows an enemy waited, his plans already in motion, his hatred burning like fire in the night. What happened next would echo through centuries, becoming a story of hope that would never be forgotten. Persia's Golden Empire. Picture a world where one man's voice could command armies across continents, where his smallest wish became reality for millions. This was the Persian Empire under King Xerxes, known in Hebrew as Ahasuerus, a realm so vast that the sun never set on its borders. From the scorching deserts of Egypt to the snow-capped peaks of the Hindu Kush, from the fertile valleys of Mesopotamia to the bustling ports of the Black Sea, all bowed before the Persian throne. Susa stood as the crown jewel of this empire, a city that seemed carved from dreams and built from gold. The royal palace rose like a mountain of marble and cedar, its walls inlaid with precious stones that caught the light and scattered rainbows across polished floors. Gardens cascaded down terraced hillsides, filled with trees and flowers gathered from every corner of the known world. Peacocks strutted through courtyards where fountains sang day and night, their waters cooled by snow brought down from distant mountains. The king himself was a figure of legend, tall and commanding, draped in purple robes that cost more than most kingdoms could afford. His crown gleamed with jewels from India, his throne was carved from ivory brought across burning deserts, and his scepter held the power of life and death over 127 provinces. When he spoke, scribes recorded his words in dozens of languages, and swift messengers carried his commands to the ends of the earth. In the great hall of the palace, columns stretched upward like the trunks of giant trees, each one a masterpiece of carved stone. Tapestries hung from the walls, telling stories of conquest and glory, while golden vessels lined tables that could seat hundreds of guests. The air was thick with incense from Arabia, and musicians from every nation played melodies that blended like silk threads into a symphony of empire. Xerxes was not merely a ruler, but a god-king in the eyes of his subjects. His court was a theater where power played out in ceremonies of breathtaking splendor. Nobles from distant lands came bearing tribute, bowing so low their foreheads touched marble floors. They brought gold from Lydia, silver from Spain, precious stones from India, and exotic animals from Africa. Each gift was a symbol of submission, each bow an acknowledgement of Persian supremacy. The administrative machinery of this empire was as impressive as its wealth. A network of roads connected every province, allowing messages to travel faster than ever before in human history. The famous royal road stretched over 1,500 miles, with relay stations where fresh horses waited for the king's messengers. A letter written in Susa could reach the far corners of the empire in mere weeks, binding together diverse peoples under one law, one currency, one absolute ruler. Yet for all its glory, this empire rested on a foundation of fear and absolute obedience. The king's word was final, his judgment without appeal. To approach him without permission meant death, unless he chose to extend his golden scepter in mercy. This was not a realm of laws, but of one man's will, magnificent and terrible in its scope. In this world of overwhelming power and luxury, the stage was set for events that would test the very foundations of empire. For even the mightiest throne can tremble when confronted with moral courage, and even the most absolute power must sometimes bow before a greater authority. Queen Vashti's defiance. The wine flowed like rivers of gold through the great banquet hall, and King Xerxes felt the warm glow of triumph in his chest. For 180 days, he had displayed the wealth and glory of his kingdom to nobles, governors, and princes from across the empire. Each day had brought new wonders, new demonstrations of Persian power and magnificence. Tonight was the grand finale, a feast that would be remembered for generations. The hall blazed with light from thousands of oil lamps. Tables groaned under the weight of delicacies from every corner of the empire. Servants moved like shadows between the guests, keeping cups filled with the finest wines from royal vineyards. The air hummed with conversation and laughter as hundreds of the most powerful men in the world celebrated their emperor's glory. Xerxes reclined on his golden couch, surrounded by his closest advisors and military commanders. The wine had made him generous and expansive, eager to show off every treasure in his possession. His mind turned to his greatest jewel of all, Queen Vashti, whose beauty was legendary throughout the empire. She was hosting her own feast for the noble women in another wing of the palace, but surely the time had come to display her magnificence to his male guests. "Bring Queen Vashti," he commanded, his voice carrying clearly across the vast hall. "Let her come wearing her royal crown, that all may see her beauty." The king's servants bowed low and hurried away, while the assembled nobles leaned forward with interest. They had heard tales of the queen's extraordinary beauty, but few had seen her up close. In the women's quarters, Queen Vashti was presiding over her own elaborate celebration. She wore robes of finest silk, her dark hair adorned with precious stones, her presence commanding the respect and admiration of the noble ladies gathered around her. When the king's messengers arrived with their summons, a strange quiet fell over the room. The queen listened to the command in silence, her face revealing nothing of her thoughts. The messengers waited, expecting immediate compliance, for no one refused a direct order from the king. But Vashti understood what was being asked of her. She was to be displayed like a prize, paraded before hundreds of wine-soaked men for their entertainment and approval. "I will not come," she said quietly, her words falling like stones into still water. The messengers stared at her in shock. Surely they had misheard. "Your Majesty, the king commands your presence. He wishes to show your beauty to his guests." Vashti's voice remained steady, though those who knew her well could see the steel in her eyes. "Tell the king that Queen Vashti will not come." The words were simple, but they carried the weight of revolution. No one, absolutely no one, refused the king's direct command. Back in the great hall, the king waited with growing impatience. His guests watched curiously as minutes passed without the queen's appearance. When his servants finally returned and whispered the impossible news in his ear, Xerxes felt the blood drain from his face. The hall had grown quiet, hundreds of eyes watching for his reaction. The king's rage built slowly, like a storm gathering strength. His queen, his possession, his prize had defied him publicly. The humiliation burned in his chest like fire. If word of this spread, if other women throughout the empire thought they could disobey their husbands, the very foundation of society would crumble. "What does the law say?" he demanded of his advisors, his voice tight with controlled fury. What should be done to Queen Vashti for refusing to obey the king's command? The royal counselors huddled together, their faces grave. They understood the implications as clearly as the king did. This was not just about one woman's disobedience, but about the entire structure of authority throughout the empire. One of them, a crafty politician named Memucan, stood to speak. "Queen Vashti has not only wronged the king, but every husband in the empire. When women hear what she has done, they will despise their own husbands. They will say, 'King Xerxes commanded Queen Vashti to appear before him, but she refused.' This very day, noble women throughout the empire will rebel against their husbands." The king nodded grimly, seeing the wisdom in these words. A decision had to be made that would send a clear message across all 127 provinces. "Let a royal decree be written," Xerxes declared, his voice carrying to every corner of the silent hall. "Let it be recorded in the laws of Persia and Media, which cannot be changed. Queen Vashti is banished from the king's presence forever. Her royal position will be given to someone better than she." The decree was written that very night, translated into every language of the empire, and sent by swift messengers to every province. Queen Vashti, who had walked in power and luxury that morning, was stripped of everything by nightfall. Her refusal to be displayed like a trophy had cost her crown, her home, and her future. The empire buzzed with the news. Some whispered that the queen had been right to preserve her dignity. Others nodded approvingly at the king's decisive action. But all understood that a line had been drawn, a precedent set that would echo through the palace corridors for years to come. The throne beside King Xerxes now sat empty, waiting for a new queen who would understand the price of defiance and the absolute nature of royal power. The search for a new queen. In the quiet of his private chambers, King Xerxes found himself alone with his thoughts and his regret. The anger that had burned so hot during the banquet had cooled to ash, leaving behind something harder to bear. The vast palace, with all its luxury and grandeur, felt empty without Vashti's presence. He had acted decisively, as a king must, but the victory tasted bitter in his mouth. Months passed in this melancholy state. The king went through the motions of ruling his empire, receiving ambassadors and signing decrees, but those closest to him could see that his heart was elsewhere. The empty throne beside him served as a constant reminder of what he had lost in his moment of rage. Vashti was gone forever, banished by laws that even he could not change, and the silence of her absence echoed through every royal ceremony. His advisors watched their emperor with growing concern. A lonely king was a dangerous king, prone to rash decisions and dark moods. They had seen empires fall when rulers became consumed by personal grief. Something had to be done to restore their master's spirit and secure the dynasty's future. It was during one of these quiet months that his personal servants approached him with a carefully prepared suggestion. "Your Majesty," they said, bowing low in the manner required by protocol, "let beautiful young women be sought throughout your empire. Let officers be appointed in every province to gather the most lovely maidens and bring them to the palace. Let them be given beauty treatments and fine clothing, and then let the king choose whichever one pleases him most to be queen in Vashti's place." The proposal stirred something in the king's weary heart. Here was a chance to start fresh, to find not just a queen, but perhaps even happiness. The idea of choosing from the most beautiful women in his vast empire appealed to his sense of power and possibility. "Let it be done," he commanded, and for the first time in months he carried genuine enthusiasm. The royal decree went out across all 127 provinces with the speed of lightning. From India to Ethiopia, From the mountains of Persia to the islands of the Mediterranean, the king's officials began their search. They were looking for young women of exceptional beauty, unmarried maidens who could potentially become the next empress of the known world. The news created waves of excitement and anxiety throughout the empire. In every city and village, families with beautiful daughters faced an impossible choice. To be selected meant luxury and power beyond imagination, but it also meant leaving home forever with no guarantee of success. The king would choose only one, and the rest would remain in the palace as minor wives, forever separated from their families and former lives. Some parents hid their daughters, knowing that once the king's officers saw them, there would be no choice in the matter. Others dressed their girls in their finest clothes and presented them hopefully, dreaming of the day when their child might wear the crown of Persia. Young women across the empire found their fates suddenly hanging in the balance, their futures to be decided by royal officials they had never met. The selection process was thorough and systematic. The king's officers moved from province to province like a great wave, examining candidates and making their choices. Beauty was the primary criterion, but they also looked for grace, intelligence, and the kind of presence that would suit a royal court. Age mattered too, for the king wanted women who were young enough to bear children and old enough to handle the responsibilities of queenship. As the chosen maidens were gathered, they were brought to Susa in carefully guarded caravans. The journey to the capital was itself a transformation, as young women who had never traveled beyond their home villages suddenly found themselves crossing deserts and mountains, seeing the vast scope of the empire they might one day help rule. In Susa, preparations were being made to receive them. An entire wing of the palace was set aside for the candidates, with servants assigned to attend to their every need. Beauty experts were brought in from across the empire, masters of cosmetics and fashion who would prepare each woman for her eventual meeting with the king. The palace buzzed with anticipation as the first groups of candidates began to arrive. Servants whispered about the beauties from different provinces, comparing their various charms and speculating about who might catch the king's eye. The king himself remained aloof from these preparations, trusting his officials to handle the details while he waited for the process to unfold. This was more than just a beauty contest. It was a careful political calculation designed to give the king a wide range of choices, while also demonstrating Persian power to every corner of the empire. By drawing candidates from all provinces, the process reinforced the unity of the realm and gave every region a theoretical stake in the outcome. The search would take months to complete, but already the palace was changing. The sound of young women's voices could be heard in gardens that had been silent, and the king's mood began to lift as he contemplated the possibilities ahead. Somewhere among these candidates from across his empire was his future queen, though neither he nor she knew it yet. Esther enters the palace. In the Jewish quarter of Susa, far from the marble halls and golden chambers of the royal palace, lived a man whose heart carried both joy and sorrow in equal measure. Mordecai was not young anymore, his beard touched with silver, his hands worn by years of honest work. But his eyes still sparkled with warmth when they fell upon the young woman who had become the center of his world. Her name was Hadassah, though she was known by her Persian name, Esther. She had come to him as a small child, orphaned when her parents died, with nowhere else to turn. Mordecai was her cousin, but he had loved her like a daughter from the moment she arrived at his door. He had raised her with gentle hands and a patient heart, teaching her the ways of their people while helping her navigate life in a foreign land. Esther had grown into a young woman of remarkable beauty, but it was a quiet, understated loveliness that seemed to come from within. Her skin was smooth as silk, her eyes dark and expressive, her movements graceful without any hint of artifice. She dressed simply, worked diligently at household tasks, and treated everyone she met with kindness and respect. More than her physical beauty, Esther possessed a quality that was harder to define, but impossible to ignore. There was a stillness about her, a sense of inner strength that showed itself not in bold gestures, but in quiet confidence. When she spoke, people listened, When she smiled, others found themselves smiling too. She had the rare gift of making others feel important and valued, though she herself seemed unaware of this power. Mordecai had taught her the stories of their people, the tales of Abraham and Sarah, of Moses and Miriam, of kings and prophets who had trusted in the God of Israel, even when surrounded by foreign gods and hostile powers. Esther knew these stories by heart, and they had shaped her understanding of what it meant to be faithful in difficult circumstances. Their life together was simple but happy. Mordecai worked as a minor official in the king's gate, a position that required him to be at the palace daily, but gave him little real influence. Esther managed their household with quiet efficiency, shopping in the markets, preparing meals, and caring for the small details that made their house a home. They were not wealthy, but they had each other, and that had always seemed enough. When the king's decree went out calling for beautiful young women to be brought to the palace, Mordecai felt a chill of fear run down his spine. He had seen Esther grow from a child into a woman, had watched men's heads turn when she walked through the marketplace, had noticed the way conversations stopped when she entered a room. Her beauty was not something that could be hidden forever. The king's officers arrived in their quarter on a day when the sun shone bright and the air smelled of spring flowers. They moved through the streets systematically, their trained eyes scanning every face, their authority absolute. When they saw Esther, their search ended. There was no discussion, no negotiation, no possibility of refusal. She would come with them to the palace. The parting was swift and painful. Mordecai held his adopted daughter close, whispering urgent instructions in her ear. "Do not tell them you are Jewish," he warned, his voice tight with fear and love. "Keep your people and your family background secret. I will come to the palace gate every day to learn how you are doing." Esther nodded, understanding the wisdom of his words, even as her heart broke at leaving the only father she had ever known. In the Persian Empire, being Jewish could be dangerous, marking one as different, foreign, potentially disloyal. Better to remain anonymous, to blend in among the other candidates until the situation became clearer. As the royal caravan prepared to leave, Esther looked back one last time at the modest house where she had known such happiness. Mordecai stood in the doorway, his hand raised in blessing and farewell. She memorized his face, storing the image in her heart like a precious treasure. The journey to the palace was short but transformative. One moment she was Hadassah, the Jewish orphan girl who helped her cousin manage his household. The next moment she was Esther, candidate for the throne of the greatest empire on earth. The weight of this change settled on her shoulders like a royal robe, heavy with possibility and responsibility. When she arrived at the women's quarters of the palace, Esther found herself in a world beyond her wildest imagination. The rooms were vast and beautiful, decorated with silk hangings and precious metals. Servants attended to every need, and the other candidates chatted excitedly about their chances of winning the king's favor. But Esther remained quiet, observing everything with careful eyes. She spoke little of her background, befriended the servants as well as the other women, and began the long process of preparing for an audience with the most powerful man in the world. Deep in her heart, she carried the faith of her fathers and the love of the man who had raised her. Whatever lay ahead, she would face it with grace and courage. The year of preparation. The women's quarters of the palace were like a small city unto themselves, bustling with activity from dawn until dusk. Esther found herself in rooms more luxurious than anything she had ever imagined, surrounded by marble columns and silk tapestries, with gardens visible through every window. But for all its beauty, this was also a place of intense competition and careful preparation. Each candidate would spend 12 months preparing for her single night with the king. It was a year-long transformation designed to polish every rough edge and enhance every natural gift. The process was as systematic as it was thorough, overseen by palace officials who had perfected the art of creating queens. Hegai was the chief eunuch in charge of the women, a man of middle years with kind eyes and vast experience in the delicate politics of the royal court. He had seen many young women pass through these chambers, some confident, others terrified, all hoping to catch the king's attention. But when he first met Esther, something about her quiet dignity impressed him immediately. "This one is different," he thought to himself as he watched her bow respectfully, but without fear. She didn't push herself forward like some of the others, didn't demand special treatment or complain about the arrangements. Instead, she listened carefully to instructions, treated the servants with courtesy, and seemed genuinely interested in learning the customs of the court. The first 6 months were devoted to treatments with oil of myrrh, a precious substance that softened the skin and gave it a subtle, exotic fragrance. Every morning, Esther would soak in baths perfumed with this costly oil, while skilled attendants massaged her hands and feet. The routine was relaxing at first, but as weeks turned to months, she began to understand that this was not luxury but preparation, a careful crafting of her physical presence. During these long, quiet hours, Esther observed everything around her. She watched how the servants moved and spoke, learning the subtle language of palace etiquette. She studied the other candidates, noting which ones seemed most likely to succeed and which ones were already growing discouraged. Most importantly, she listened to the gossip that flowed like water through the women's quarters. She learned that King Xerxes preferred women who were not too forward, who showed respect for his position while maintaining their own dignity. She discovered that he valued intelligence as well as beauty, conversation as well as appearance. The women who had spent brief times with him reported that he asked questions about their backgrounds and interests, that he seemed genuinely curious about the different parts of his empire. The second 6 months brought treatments with perfumes and cosmetics, oils and spices, gathered from every corner of the empire. Esther learned to enhance her natural beauty without hiding it, to move with the flowing grace expected of a queen, to speak in the cultured tones of the royal court. Master craftsmen taught her the art of selecting jewelry and clothing that complemented her coloring and figure. But perhaps most importantly, she learned the intricate dance of palace politics. She discovered which servants could be trusted with secrets and which ones reported everything to their superiors. She identified the other candidates who might become allies and those who saw her as a threat. She began to understand the complex web of relationships that connected everyone in the royal household. Through all of this, Esther maintained her secret. She spoke Persian fluently and showed appropriate respect for Persian customs, but she never revealed her Jewish heritage. When asked about her family, she spoke vaguely of distant relatives and humble origins. When the other women discussed their gods and religious practices, she listened politely but said little about her own beliefs. Haggai grew increasingly fond of her as the months passed. There was something refreshing about her lack of pretension, her genuine kindness to everyone, regardless of their station. He began giving her small advantages, better rooms, choice foods, the 7 most skilled maids in the palace. He did this quietly, without creating jealousy among the other candidates, but his favor was clear to those who knew how to read the signs. Meanwhile, outside the palace walls, Mordecai came every day to the court of the women's quarters, hoping for news of his beloved Esther. He couldn't speak to her directly, but sometimes he could catch glimpses of her in the gardens, and occasionally servants would carry messages between them. These brief connections were like lifelines, reminding Esther that she was not alone in this strange new world. As her year of preparation drew toward its close, Esther felt the weight of anticipation growing heavier each day. Soon she would meet the king, and her entire future would be decided in a single evening. She had learned everything the palace masters could teach her about beauty and grace, about protocol and conversation. But deep in her heart, she carried something that no amount of preparation could create or destroy: the quiet faith that had sustained her people through centuries of exile, and the love of the man who had raised her to trust in something greater than earthly power. The other candidates spoke constantly of their hopes and fears, their strategies for winning the king's favor. But Esther remained largely silent, preparing not just her appearance but her spirit for whatever lay ahead. Chosen by the king. The night had finally come. After 12 months of careful preparation, Esther would meet the king. She stood in her chamber as the sun set over Susa, surrounded by servants who fussed over every detail of her appearance. Her hands were steady, her breathing calm, though inside her heart beat like a captured bird. Haggai had offered her anything she desired to wear or carry with her to the king's chamber. The other candidates had chosen elaborate jewelry, costly perfumes, exotic gifts designed to catch the royal eye. But Esther asked for nothing beyond what Haggai himself suggested. She trusted his judgment more than her own inexperience, understanding that his years of service had taught him what truly pleased the king. Her dress was simple but exquisite, made of silk so fine it seemed to shimmer with its own light. Her hair was arranged in an elegant style that framed her face without hiding its natural beauty. She wore only a few pieces of jewelry, each one chosen to complement rather than overwhelm. The overall effect was striking in its restraint, beautiful without being flashy, memorable without being obvious. As evening deepened, a servant came to escort her through the palace corridors. The walk seemed endless, through halls she had never seen, past guards who nodded respectfully but said nothing. The palace at night was a different place than during the day, quieter, but somehow more intense, filled with shadows and whispered conversations. When the great doors opened and she stepped into the king's private chamber, Esther felt the full weight of the moment settle upon her. King Xerxes sat waiting, and for the first time she saw him not as a distant figure of power, but as a man. He was older than she had expected, with lines around his eyes that spoke of the burden of ruling an empire. But there was also something in his gaze that surprised her: loneliness. The king had seen many beautiful women over the past months. Some had dazzled him with their exotic appeal, others had impressed him with their sophistication or intelligence. But when Esther entered his chamber, something shifted in the air. There was a quality about her that was difficult to define, a combination of beauty and dignity that made him lean forward with sudden interest. They talked long into the night. Esther answered his questions about her background carefully, revealing little, but speaking honestly about what she chose to share. She asked him thoughtful questions about his empire, showing genuine interest in the challenges of ruling so vast a realm. There was no pretense between them, no artificial charm or calculated seduction, just two people discovering that they enjoyed each other's company. The king found himself relaxing in ways he hadn't experienced in years. Esther's presence was soothing without being dull, engaging without being demanding. She listened when he spoke about the burdens of leadership, and she offered insights that showed both wisdom and compassion. When she laughed at his stories, her amusement seemed genuine rather than dutiful. As the hours passed, Xerxes realized that he had found something he hadn't even known he was looking for. This young woman possessed not only the beauty required of a queen, but also the character needed to be a true partner. She could grace his court with elegance, but more importantly, she could share the weight of the crown with understanding and strength. When morning came, the king's decision was already made in his heart, though protocol required him to see the remaining candidates. But each woman who came after Esther only confirmed his choice. They were lovely, accomplished, charming in their various ways, but none of them stirred his soul the way she had. The coronation was planned, with all the ceremony befitting the elevation of a new queen. The palace buzzed with preparations as word spread that the king had made his choice. Servants who had watched Esther during her year of preparation smiled knowingly, for many had suspected that her quiet grace would triumph over more obvious charms. On the day of her crowning, Esther stood once again before the king, but this time in the presence of the entire court. Nobles from across the empire had gathered to witness the ceremony, and the great hall blazed with gold and jewels. The royal crown was placed upon her head, heavy with precious stones and the weight of responsibility. "Queen Esther," the king proclaimed, his voice carrying to every corner of the vast chamber. The words echoed off marble walls and painted ceilings, officially transforming the Jewish orphan girl into the second most powerful person in the empire. King Xerxes declared a holiday throughout all his provinces in honor of his new queen. He gave gifts to his officials and reduced taxes across the empire, sharing his joy with his subjects. The celebration lasted for days, with feasts and festivals in every major city. But perhaps the most significant moment came when the public ceremonies ended, and the king and queen were alone together. Xerxes took Esther's hand and looked into her eyes with something deeper than royal affection. "I have chosen well," he said quietly, and she knew that he was speaking not just as a king, but as a man who had found companionship in an unexpected place. Esther had become queen of the greatest empire on earth, but she had also become something more precious, a woman loved by her husband for who she truly was, even though he did not yet know all of her secrets. The threat in the shadows. Life as queen brought Esther into a world of constant ceremony and careful protocol, but it also gave her opportunities to observe the intricate workings of the Persian court. From her elevated position, she could see patterns and connections that had been invisible during her year of preparation. The empire ran on an elaborate network of relationships, favors, and information, and power flowed through channels that were not always obvious. Mordecai had remained true to his promise, coming daily to the palace gate where he served in his modest position as a minor official. His presence there was both a comfort to Esther and a source of valuable intelligence. The king's gate was where news gathered like water in a pool, where servants gossiped and officials exchanged information, where the pulse of the empire could be felt by those who knew how to listen. It was during one of these ordinary days that Mordecai overheard something that made his blood run cold. Two of the king's bodyguards, Bigthan and Teresh, were speaking in low, urgent tones near the guardhouse. They were angry about something, their voices tight with resentment, and as Mordecai listened more carefully, their words became clear. They were planning to assassinate King Xerxes. The conspiracy was simple but deadly. As the king's personal guards, they had access to his private chambers and knowledge of his daily routines. They knew when he would be alone, when his attention would be focused elsewhere, when a quick strike could eliminate him before help could arrive. Their plan was to strike during the evening meal, when the king would be relaxed and unsuspecting. Mordecai felt his hands begin to tremble as the full implications sank in. If the king died, the empire would be thrown into chaos. Queen Esther's position would become precarious, possibly deadly, as various factions fought for control. The stability that protected Jewish communities throughout the empire would crumble, leaving them vulnerable to persecution or worse. But beyond these political calculations, Mordecai was moved by simpler human considerations. King Xerxes had been kind to Esther, had chosen her not just for her beauty, but for her character. He had given her love as well as power, and she had found happiness in their marriage. Mordecai could not stand by and allow evil men to destroy what had become precious to his adopted daughter. The challenge was how to warn the king without revealing too much about himself or Esther. Direct access to the monarch was impossible for someone of Mordecai's lowly status, and any accusation against the royal bodyguards would require proof that he did not possess. The conspirators would simply deny everything, and Mordecai's word alone would not be enough to convince anyone. The solution came to him as he watched Esther's servants moving through the palace corridors. Information flowed through the palace like water through channels, and there were established ways for news to reach the queen's ears. If he could get word to Esther, she could bring the matter to the king's attention in a way that would be taken seriously. That evening, when Esther's trusted maid came to the gate on a routine errand, Mordecai approached her carefully. He had known this woman for months, had established a friendly relationship that allowed for occasional messages between himself and his adopted daughter. Now he asked her to carry the most important message of his life. "Tell Queen Esther that Mordecai has learned of a plot against the king's life," he whispered urgently. Two guards, Bigthan and Teresh, plan to kill him tomorrow evening. She must warn him immediately. The maid's eyes widened with shock and fear, but she nodded and hurried away. Within hours, the message had reached Esther in her private chambers. She wasted no time in seeking an audience with her husband, knowing that every moment of delay increased the danger. King Xerxes listened to his queen's report with growing alarm and admiration. The plot she described was entirely plausible, and her concern for his safety touched him deeply. He immediately ordered an investigation, and when the conspirators were questioned separately, their stories contradicted each other in ways that revealed their guilt. The investigation moved swiftly and thoroughly. Palace guards searched the conspirators' quarters and found evidence of their treasonous plans. Under interrogation, both men eventually confessed, admitting their intention to murder the king and seize power for themselves. Justice was swift and final. Bigthan and Teresh were executed for their treason. Their bodies hung as a warning to any others who might consider betraying their king. The threat to Xerxes' life had been eliminated, but more importantly for the future, a debt of gratitude had been created. The king ordered the entire incident to be recorded in the official chronicles of his reign. Every detail was carefully documented. The names of the conspirators, the nature of their plot, and most significantly, the fact that Mordecai the Jew had been the one to uncover and report the assassination attempt. The scribes wrote it all down in the precise language of official records, creating a permanent account that would be preserved in the royal archives. King Xerxes spoke privately with Esther about the incident, praising her quick action in bringing the warning to his attention. "Your cousin has saved my life," he told her, though he still did not know the full extent of their relationship. Such loyalty deserves reward. But in the rush of events and the relief of having escaped death, no immediate honor was given to Mordecai. The king spoke of rewarding him. The incident was duly recorded, but somehow in the busy flow of imperial business, the actual bestowal of honors was delayed. Mordecai returned to his modest position at the gate, content to know that he had done his duty and that Esther remained safe in her elevated position. Neither Mordecai nor the king could have imagined how crucial this recorded debt would become in the days ahead. The chronicles that now contained Mordecai's name would soon play a role far greater than anyone anticipated. Sometimes the most important events are those that seem small at the time, seeds planted in ordinary soil that will grow into mighty trees when the season is right. Esther, too, learned valuable lessons from this crisis. She had successfully navigated her first real test as queen, demonstrating both loyalty to her husband and protection for her people. She had shown that she could handle sensitive information wisely and act decisively when necessary. The experience gave her confidence in her ability to influence events within the palace while maintaining her carefully guarded secrets. The failed assassination plot had also revealed something important about the nature of power in the Persian Empire. Even the king, for all his absolute authority, remained vulnerable to betrayal from those closest to him. Trust was a precious commodity in the royal court, and Esther had proven herself worthy of it in the most dramatic way possible. As life in the palace returned to its normal rhythms, Esther continued to grow into her role as queen. She learned the delicate balance between public ceremony and private influence, between supporting her husband's decisions and offering her own counsel. The king increasingly sought her opinions on matters both personal and political, and their marriage deepened from attraction into genuine partnership. But beneath the surface of this domestic happiness, larger forces were stirring in the empire. Ambitious men were rising to power, seeking their own advancement at the cost of others. The stage was being set for conflicts that would test everything Esther had learned about courage, wisdom, and the responsibilities of power. Enter Haman. In the third year of Esther's reign as queen, King Xerxes made a decision that would reshape the balance of power in his empire. He chose to elevate one man above all his other nobles, granting him authority second only to the royal throne itself. The man he selected was Haman, son of Hammedatha, an Agagite whose family traced their lineage to ancient enemies of Israel, though few in the Persian court understood the significance of this heritage. Haman was not chosen for his humble character or his kindness to others. Instead, the king saw in him qualities that seemed useful for managing an empire: cunning, ambition, and an absolute dedication to advancing Persian interests. Haman had a sharp mind for administration and an even sharper instinct for political maneuvering. He knew how to flatter those above him while intimidating those below, and he had built a network of allies throughout the government through careful distribution of favors and threats. The promotion was announced with great ceremony in the royal court. Haman was given robes of honor, a signet ring that carried almost as much authority as the king's own, and a seat of power that placed him above all other officials. From that day forward, every noble, every governor, every servant in the empire would bow when Haman passed, acknowledging his elevation to the highest ranks of power. The physical transformation in Haman was immediate and striking. Already a tall man with a commanding presence, he now carried himself with the swagger of someone who knew that his word could determine the fate of provinces. His clothing became more elaborate, his manner more imperious, his expectations of deference more demanding. Power, it seemed, had awakened something in him that had been waiting for the opportunity to emerge. But power also revealed the darker aspects of Haman's character. He was not content simply to exercise authority. He needed to see that authority acknowledged and celebrated by everyone around him. The king's decree that all officials should bow to him was not enough for Haman's ego. He wanted to see fear in people's eyes when they lowered themselves before him, to know that his elevation had made others feel small and insignificant. His rise to power created ripples throughout the palace and beyond. Some officials who had previously considered themselves influential suddenly found themselves marginalized, forced to curry favor with a man they had once treated as an equal. Others, recognizing the shift in power, quickly aligned themselves with Haman, hoping to benefit from his new authority. Haman's family background added another layer to his character, though few in the Persian court understood its significance. As an Agagite, he belonged to a people with ancient grievances against the Jewish nation. His ancestors had been enemies of Israel in the distant past, and something of that ancestral hatred seemed to flow in his veins, waiting for the right circumstances to manifest itself. The king, for his part, was pleased with his choice. Haman proved to be an efficient administrator, skilled at implementing royal policies and maintaining order throughout the provinces. He showed proper deference to the throne while displaying the kind of ruthless effectiveness that Xerxes valued in his subordinates. The empire ran smoothly under Haman's management, and the king felt free to focus on other matters, confident that his chief minister would handle the details of governance. Queen Esther watched Haman's rise with careful attention, but said little about it in her conversations with the king. She had learned to observe palace politics without inserting herself unnecessarily into every development. But something about Haman's manner troubled her, though she could not yet put her finger on exactly what it was. There was a coldness in his eyes when he looked at people he considered beneath him, a hardness that suggested he might be capable of cruelty if given the opportunity. In the royal court, Haman's word quickly became law. Officials competed to gain his favor, knowing that his recommendation could advance their careers while his disapproval could end them. He built a complex web of relationships based on fear and self-interest, rewarding those who served him faithfully while making examples of those who crossed him. The common people throughout the empire began to feel the effects of Haman's influence as well. New policies emerged that seemed designed more to demonstrate power than to serve any real administrative purpose. Taxes were collected more aggressively, regulations were enforced more strictly, and local officials became more demanding in their treatment of ordinary citizens. But perhaps most telling was how Haman responded to the honor and ceremony that now surrounded him everywhere he went. While most people would have eventually grown accustomed to constant bowing and scraping, Haman seemed to feed on it like a plant drinking water. Each act of deference appeared to increase his appetite for more. Each display of power made him hungry for greater demonstrations of his authority. The stage was now set for a confrontation that would test the very foundations of justice and mercy in the Persian Empire. Haman had been given almost unlimited power, and his character would soon reveal itself in ways that would threaten the safety of thousands of innocent people. The man who now sat at the right hand of the king carried within himself the seeds of destruction, and it would not be long before those seeds began to sprout. Mordecai's defiance. Every morning, as the sun rose over the great city of Susa, officials and servants would make their way through the king's gate to begin another day of imperial business. The massive entrance to the palace complex was more than just a doorway. It was a symbol of Persian power and a gathering place where information flowed like water through countless channels. Among those who passed through daily was Mordecai, still serving in his modest position, still maintaining his quiet watch over the welfare of his adopted daughter, the queen. The routine had become familiar over the years. Officials would arrive in order of their rank and importance. Servants would hurry through carrying messages and supplies, and all would pause to show proper respect when higher-ranking nobles appeared. The elaborate dance of court protocol played out dozens of times each day, a constant reminder of hierarchy and power that kept the machinery of empire running smoothly. When Haman began passing through the gate in his new role as chief minister, everything changed. The king's decree had been clear. All officials were to bow before Haman as a sign of respect for his elevated position. Most people complied without question, understanding that defying such a direct royal command could have serious consequences. They would lower their heads, bend their knees, and wait for the great man to pass before resuming their business. But Mordecai did not bow. The first time it happened, those nearby assumed it was an oversight, or perhaps that Mordecai had not noticed Haman's approach. Surely, he would correct his mistake once someone explained the new protocol to him. But when fellow officials quietly informed him of the requirement, Mordecai's response was quiet, but firm. I will not bow. Day after day, the scene repeated itself. Haman would arrive at the gate surrounded by servants and lesser officials, all of whom would immediately prostrate themselves in the prescribed manner. But in the midst of this display of submission, one figure would remain standing, Mordecai, his back straight, his eyes forward, showing respect for Haman's position, but refusing to bow his body in worship-like submission. At first, Haman was too busy with his new responsibilities to notice one man's defiance among so many displays of deference. But as days turned to weeks, other officials began to whisper about the Jewish man who refused to follow the king's command. Some were scandalized by such open disobedience. Others were secretly impressed by his courage, but all recognized that the situation could not continue indefinitely. When the matter was finally brought to Haman's attention, his reaction was immediate and intense. No one had dared to defy him since his elevation to power, and the idea that a minor official would publicly refuse to acknowledge his authority struck him like a physical blow. His face flushed with anger, his hands clenched into fists, and those around him could see the rage building in his eyes. "Who is this man?" Haman demanded, his voice tight with controlled fury. "Who dares to disobey the king's command?" The officials around him exchanged nervous glances before one of them spoke up. "His name is Mordecai. He is a Jew who serves in a minor position at the gate. The other officials have told him repeatedly about the requirement to bow, but he refuses to comply." The word Jew seemed to hang in the air like a spark near dry wood. Something shifted in Haman's expression, a hardening that went beyond simple anger at disobedience. His ancestral hatred of the Jewish people, dormant but never dead, began to stir like a sleeping beast awakening to the scent of prey. Haman confronted Mordecai directly the next day, approaching him with all the authority of his high office. "You there?" he called out, his voice carrying across the courtyard. "You are the one who refuses to bow when I pass?" Mordecai turned to face him calmly, showing no fear despite the obvious danger of the situation. "I am Mordecai, and yes, I do not bow to you or any man. I show respect to the king and to those in authority, but I do not worship mortal flesh." The distinction Mordecai was making was crucial but subtle. In his understanding, bowing to Haman in the manner demanded was not merely showing respect, but offering a form of worship that belonged only to God. As a faithful Jew, he could acknowledge Haman's political authority without compromising his religious convictions. But Haman either could not or would not understand this distinction. To him, Mordecai's refusal was nothing less than rebellion, a public humiliation that undermined his authority and challenged the entire system of imperial power. Worse still, the fact that Mordecai was Jewish awakened all the ancient prejudices and hatreds that had been passed down through generations of his family. "This man mocks the king's authority," Haman declared to the assembled officials. "He shows contempt for Persian law and order. Such defiance cannot be tolerated." But even as he spoke these words, Haman's mind was working on a larger and more terrible plan. Punishing one man, even executing him, would not satisfy the rage that was building in his heart. Mordecai's defiance had become, in Haman's twisted thinking, representative of something larger, the stubborn refusal of the Jewish people to fully submit to Persian authority. In the days that followed, Haman began to research Jewish customs and history, learning about their religious practices and their sense of identity as a people apart. What he discovered only fed his growing hatred. Here was a nation within his empire that maintained its own laws and customs, that worshipped its own God, that considered itself chosen and special, despite being conquered and scattered. The seed of a monstrous plan began to grow in Haman's mind. Why should he content himself with punishing one defiant Jew when he could solve the Jewish problem once and for all? With his position and authority, he could craft a solution that would eliminate what he saw as a source of disloyalty throughout the empire. Mordecai continued his daily routine, still refusing to bow, still maintaining his quiet dignity in the face of growing danger. He could see the hatred in Haman's eyes, could sense that his simple act of religious conviction had unleashed something far more dangerous than he had anticipated. But he also knew that some principles were worth any price, and that bowing to evil was a form of surrender he could never accept. The decree of destruction. In the royal courts of Susa, whispers carry deadly weight. Haman's mind churns with revenge, but not just against one man. His wounded pride demands something far greater, something that will echo through history. The Persian Empire stretches across 3 continents. From India to Ethiopia, 127 provinces bow to King Xerxes. In this vast realm, scattered like seeds on fertile ground, live the Jewish people. They worship differently, they follow different customs, they remember a homeland far from Persia's golden halls. Haman sees opportunity in difference. He approaches the king with careful words, painting a picture of disloyalty where none exists. "There is a certain people scattered throughout your kingdom," he begins, his voice smooth as silk. "Their laws are different from everyone else's. They do not obey your royal laws." The king listens as Haman weaves his web of lies. These people pose a threat, the advisor claims. They cannot be trusted. They stand apart from the empire's unity. His words drip with false concern for the kingdom's safety. But Haman offers a solution, a final solution. If it pleases the king, let a decree be written to destroy them all. To sweeten this bitter poison, he promises 10,000 talents of silver for the royal treasury, a fortune that could fund armies or build cities. The king barely considers the request. Power has made him lazy. Trust has made him careless. He slides his signet ring from his finger and hands it to Haman. "The money is yours," he says with a wave. "Do with the people as you see fit." With that simple gesture, the fate of an entire people hangs in the balance. The king's ring carries absolute authority. Whatever decree bears its seal becomes unbreakable law throughout the empire. Haman's eyes gleam as he takes possession of royal power. He calls for the king's scribes, and they gather like vultures around carrion. The date is the 13th day of the first month. Spring should bring hope, but today it brings only darkness. The scribes work through the night, their reed pens scratching across papyrus. They write in every language of the empire, Aramaic for the western provinces, Greek for the coastal cities, local dialects for distant lands. The message must reach every corner of Xerxes' domain. The decree is simple in its horror. On the 13th day of Adar, the 12th month, all Jews are to be killed, men, women, children, young and old alike. Their property will be seized, their homes ransacked, their very existence erased from Persian soil. But the cruelest detail lies in the timing. Haman has cast lots to choose this date. The word pur means lot in the ancient tongue. He believes the gods have blessed his plan with perfect timing. 11 months of waiting. 11 months for fear to grow like a cancer in Jewish hearts. The sealed scrolls are carried by the fastest horses in the empire. Royal messengers thunder across desert roads and mountain passes. They race through bustling marketplaces and quiet farming villages. Death follows in their wake, written in official script and stamped with royal authority. In Susa's citadel, Haman and the king sit down to drink wine. They celebrate as if announcing a festival instead of genocide. The irony cuts deep. While they toast their decision, an entire people faces extinction. The palace rings with laughter while outside, darkness gathers like storm clouds on the horizon. The messengers fan out across the known world. Some ride toward Egypt's ancient pyramids. Others head for Greece's marble cities. Still more race toward India's spice markets and Ethiopia's golden mines. Each carries the same terrible news wrapped in legal language and royal seals. Time moves differently when death has a date. For most people in the empire, the 13th of Adar is just another day on the calendar. But for the Jewish people, it becomes a countdown to extinction. 365 days to prepare for the end of everything they hold dear. The decree serves Haman's purpose perfectly. It satisfies his hunger for revenge against Mordecai while removing what he sees as a threat to Persian unity. He has turned personal grudge into state policy, private hatred into public law. But Haman has made a crucial mistake. In his rush for revenge, he has forgotten something vital. Queen Esther sits on Persia's throne, beloved by the king and admired by the court. She holds power beyond Haman's imagination, and she carries a secret that could change everything. The 13th of Adar looms ahead like a dark mountain. Yet seeds of hope remain, hidden in the most unexpected places. Sometimes salvation comes from where we least expect it. Sometimes the very instrument of our rescue sits silent in royal chambers, waiting for the right moment to act. The die has been cast, the decree is sealed, but the story is far from over. Shockwaves across the empire. The royal messengers arrive like harbingers of doom. In every city, in every province, in every distant corner of the Persian Empire, the same scene unfolds. Town criers read the decree aloud in market squares. Scrolls are posted on government buildings. The king's will spreads like wildfire across the ancient world. In Jerusalem's ruins, where some Jews have returned to rebuild their temple, the news strikes like lightning. Elders gather in stunned silence, their weathered faces etched with disbelief. The temple work stops. Hammers fall silent. Stonemasons abandon their walls. Along the rivers of Babylon, where many Jews still make their homes, mothers clutch their children close. Fathers pace their courtyards, minds racing with impossible choices. Should they flee? Should they hide? Should they prepare to fight? The questions multiply faster than answers. In Alexandria's busy port, Jewish merchants watch their Gentile neighbors with new suspicion. Yesterday's friends might become tomorrow's executioners. Business partnerships forged over decades crumble in moments. Trust evaporates like morning mist. The reaction follows a pattern across the empire. First comes shock, sharp and sudden as a knife thrust. Then fear creeps in, cold and relentless. Finally, grief settles over Jewish communities like a heavy blanket. They mourn not just for their future deaths, but for the life they thought they knew. In distant provinces, some Jews remember stories their grandparents told, tales of exile and persecution, of Pharaoh's bondage and Babylonian captivity. History seems to repeat itself with crushing weight. Will they ever find peace in foreign lands? But the Gentile population reacts differently. Many feel confused by the harsh decree. They have Jewish neighbors, Jewish friends, Jewish business partners. These people seem harmless enough. Why does the king want them destroyed? Some non-Jews feel genuine sympathy. They whisper warnings to Jewish friends. They offer hiding places or help with escape plans. Human kindness blooms even in terror's shadow. Others see opportunity in tragedy. Jewish property will be forfeit to whoever seizes it. Jewish businesses will need new owners. Jewish homes will stand empty, waiting for new families. Greed begins to sharpen its claws. In Susa itself, the capital city buzzes with confusion. The decree has been announced, but life continues much as before. Palace servants go about their duties. Merchants hawk their wares. Children play in dusty streets. The ordinary world seems untouched by extraordinary evil. Yet, beneath the surface, currents of change flow like underground rivers. Jewish families begin to prepare for the worst. They bury valuable items in secret places. They send coded messages to relatives in distant cities. They teach their children prayers they hope will give comfort in dark times ahead. Meanwhile, Mordecai receives the news like a physical blow. He tears his clothes in the ancient gesture of mourning. Rough sackcloth replaces his usual garments. Ashes cover his head where pride once rested. The transformation is complete and heartbreaking. Through Susa's streets he walks, crying out in anguish. His voice carries the pain of an entire people. Passers-by stop and stare. They have never seen the dignified court official in such distress. Some whisper among themselves, wondering what tragedy could reduce such a man to public grief. Mordecai's path leads him to the king's gate, but he cannot enter. Persian law forbids anyone in mourning clothes from approaching the royal presence. Even in his desperation, he must respect the protocols that govern palace life. Other Jews in Susa follow Mordecai's example. Soon the streets echo with lamentation. The sound carries through the city like a funeral dirge. Sackcloth and ashes become the uniform of the condemned. In every province touched by the decree, similar scenes unfold. Fasting begins spontaneously. Prayers rise to heaven like smoke from countless altars. The Jewish people turn to their God as they have done throughout their long history of trials. Some pray for deliverance, remembering how Moses led their ancestors from Egyptian slavery. Others pray for courage, thinking of David facing the giant Goliath. Still others pray simply for peace, hoping death might come swiftly when the time arrives. The decree creates an odd suspension of normal life. 11 months stretch ahead like an eternity. How do you live normally while waiting to die? How do you plan for tomorrow when tomorrow might not come? Some Jews abandon hope entirely. They sink into despair like stones thrown into deep water. Others rage against the injustice, but their anger has nowhere to go. The decree is law. The king's word is absolute. But hidden among the grief and terror, something else begins to grow. A quiet determination. A stubborn refusal to surrender without a fight. If death is certain, perhaps they can at least choose how to meet it. Children ask their parents questions that have no good answers. Why do people hate them? What have they done wrong? Will God save them as he saved their ancestors? The questions pierce hearts already breaking with fear and sorrow. In royal chambers throughout the empire, local governors read their copies of the decree with varying reactions. Some relish the chance to curry favor with Haman by enforcing it zealously. Others worry about the practical problems of carrying out mass murder. Still others quietly hope the king might change his mind before the appointed day arrives. The 13th of Adar begins to take on mythical significance. It becomes more than a date on the calendar. It becomes the dividing line between the world that was and the world that might never be. Mordecai's plea to Esther. In the royal palace, Queen Esther lives in golden isolation. Silk curtains shield her windows, marble floors cool her feet, servants attend her every need with silent efficiency. The outside world feels distant as a dream, but even palace walls cannot keep out all news. Esther's servants notice changes in the city's mood. They whisper about crowds of mourners in the streets. They mention strange sounds of wailing that drift through the air like wind through broken reeds. When reports reach Esther about Mordecai's condition, her comfortable world tilts sideways. The man who raised her like a father sits in sackcloth at the king's gate. The cousin who taught her wisdom now displays public grief. Something terrible has happened. Esther sends fresh clothes to Mordecai through her servant Hataksh. Perhaps if he dresses properly, he can enter the palace and explain this mystery. But the clothes come back untouched. Mordecai refuses comfort while his people face destruction. Hatak becomes the bridge between two worlds. He carries messages from the queen's chambers to the king's gate and back again. Each journey reveals more of the truth that has been hidden from royal eyes. Through Hatak, Mordecai tells Esther everything: the decree of death, Haman's plot, the 13th of Adar, the 10,000 talents of silver. Every detail falls on Esther's ears like hammer blows on an anvil. Her protected world crumbles as reality crashes in, but knowing the truth brings its own burden. Mordecai asks the impossible. He wants Esther to approach the king uninvited, to plead for her people's lives, to risk everything she has gained for the sake of people the king doesn't even know she belongs to. The request terrifies Esther more than death itself. Persian law is clear and merciless. Anyone who enters the king's presence without invitation faces automatic execution. The only exception comes if the king extends his golden scepter. But there is no guarantee of mercy. Royal whim decides who lives and who dies. Esther sends back her answer through faithful Hataksh. She explains the law to Mordecai, hoping he will understand her impossible position. She has not been summoned to the king for 30 days. Their relationship, once warm and frequent, has grown distant. She cannot predict his mood or his mercy, but Mordecai's response cuts through her fears like a sword through silk. His words, carried again by Hataksh, change everything Esther thought she knew about her situation. Do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape, Mordecai tells her. The message strips away her illusions of safety. The palace walls that seem so protective are really just a more comfortable prison. When the 13th of Adar comes, royal favor will not save a Jewish queen. Mordecai continues with words that ring like prophecy. If you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place. He expresses faith that God will save his people somehow, even if Esther refuses to act. Divine plans do not depend on human cooperation, though they often invite it. But then comes the phrase that will echo through history. And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this? The words hang in the air like destiny calling its chosen instrument. Mordecai suggests that Esther's entire life has led to this moment. Her beauty that caught the king's eye, her wisdom that won his heart, her position that gives her access to absolute power. Perhaps none of it was accident. Perhaps it was all preparation for this one crucial conversation. The phrase "for such a time as this" becomes a key that unlocks Esther's understanding. She begins to see her life not as a series of fortunate events, but as a careful preparation for an impossible task. Every comfort she has enjoyed, every privilege she has received, every moment of the king's favor, all of it has been building toward this request. Esther realizes that her choice is really no choice at all. She can remain silent and watch her people die, knowing she might have saved them. Or she can act and risk death, but with the possibility of rescue for millions. When the options are laid out so starkly, courage becomes the only reasonable response. But Esther is no fool, rushing blindly into danger. She understands the power of preparation and the importance of timing. If she must risk everything, she will do it wisely. She will use every advantage available to her. Her response to Mordecai shows the steel beneath her silk. She accepts the challenge, but on her terms. She will approach the king, but first she requires something from her people: unity and purpose, shared sacrifice, common cause. Go, gather together all the Jews who are in Susa, she tells Mordecai through Hatak. Fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. The request binds her people to her mission. Their prayers and sacrifice will strengthen her resolve. Esther also commits herself and her maids to the same fast. Royal privilege will not exempt her from the discipline she asks of others. For 3 days, the palace and the people will share the same hunger, the same focus, the same desperate hope. The fast serves multiple purposes. It demonstrates the seriousness of the situation. It unites scattered Jews in common purpose. It prepares hearts and minds for divine intervention, and it gives Esther time to plan her approach carefully. After that, I will go to the king, even though it is against the law, Esther declares. Her words carry the weight of absolute commitment. She has counted the cost and accepted it. Fear remains, but it no longer controls her decisions. Then comes her final statement, perhaps the bravest words ever spoken by a queen. And if I perish, I perish. The phrase encapsulates everything heroic about the human spirit. When faced with impossible odds, sometimes the only victory lies in refusing to surrender without a fight. Esther's transformation is complete. The frightened girl who once hid her identity has become a woman willing to risk everything for her people. The queen who lived in comfort has chosen danger over safety. The survivor has decided to become a savior. Esther's inner turmoil. 3 days stretch ahead like a lifetime. In her royal chambers, Queen Esther begins the most difficult fast of her life. No food passes her lips. No wine touches her tongue. Even water becomes a rare comfort, sipped only when thirst becomes unbearable. The palace servants notice the change immediately. Their queen, usually radiant with health and beauty, grows pale and drawn. Her eyes, once bright with contentment, now burn with inner fire. Something fundamental has shifted in the royal chambers. Esther's maids join her in the fast, though they understand little of what drives their mistress. They see her lips moving in silent prayer. They watch her pace the marble floors like a caged lioness. They witness her staring out windows toward a gate she cannot see, where her cousin Mordecai sits in mourning. In the quiet hours before dawn, when even the palace sleeps, Esther wrestles with fears that threaten to overwhelm her courage. The king's face haunts her thoughts. Will she see love in his eyes when she appears uninvited, or will she find only cold anger at her presumption? She remembers happier times when Xerxes would summon her eagerly to his presence. His delight in her company had been genuine and warm. But 30 days have passed since their last private meeting. Royal affections can cool as quickly as they kindle. Palace favorites fall from grace with devastating speed. The weight of her secret identity presses down like a stone. For years, she has hidden her Jewish heritage, following Mordecai's careful instructions. Now she must reveal everything to a king who has just authorized the destruction of her people. The irony cuts deep. She must trust her life to the man who has unknowingly signed her death warrant. Sleep becomes elusive during the long fast. When exhaustion finally claims her, nightmares fill the darkness. She dreams of the 13th of Adar, of soldiers coming for Jewish families, of children crying for parents who cannot protect them. She wakes with tears on her cheeks and terror in her heart. But alongside the fear grows something stronger, a sense of purpose that she has never known before. Esther begins to understand that her entire life has been preparation for this moment. Every lesson in palace protocol becomes armor for the battle ahead. Every hour spent learning the king's moods becomes a weapon she can wield. The fast sharpens her mind even as it weakens her body. Hunger strips away distractions and focuses her thoughts with laser intensity. She plans every word she will speak, every gesture she will make. If she gets only one chance to save her people, that chance must be perfect. Esther's prayers become more desperate as the hours pass. She cries out to the God of her fathers, the God who saved Daniel from the lions and the 3 young men from the fiery furnace. She begs for wisdom to know what to say. She pleads for favor in the king's eyes. She asks for courage to overcome her human weakness. The queen also prays for her people scattered across the empire. She imagines Jewish families huddled together in fear. She thinks of children who will never grow up if her mission fails. She pictures Mordecai sitting in sackcloth, placing all his hope in her trembling hands. By the second day, physical weakness begins to take its toll. Esther's steps grow unsteady. Her hands shake slightly when she tries to write. The ornate mirror in her chamber reflects a face growing gaunt with sacrifice. Beauty fades, but determination blazes brighter. Her maids worry about their mistress, but dare not break the fast she has commanded. They watch helplessly as the woman they serve transforms before their eyes. The soft queen they knew is becoming someone harder, stronger, more focused than a blade. On the second night, Esther makes a crucial decision about her approach to the king. She will not burst into his presence with desperate pleas and obvious panic. Instead, she will use subtlety and patience. She will appeal to his emotions rather than his logic. She will remind him why he fell in love with her in the first place. The third day dawns with agonizing slowness. Esther knows that by evening, her fast will end one way or another. Either she will break it in celebration of the king's mercy, or she will die without ever tasting food again. The thought should terrify her, but instead, it brings strange peace. As afternoon approaches, Esther calls for her finest robes. If she is to risk everything, she will do it dressed as a queen. Her servants bring garments of purple and gold, fabrics that shimmer like captured sunlight. Jewelry glitters at her throat and wrists. Despite the fast, she prepares to look as beautiful as possible. The transformation amazes even her experienced maids. Somehow, the 3-day fast has not diminished Esther's beauty, but refined it. Her face may be thinner, but her cheekbones are more striking. Her eyes may be shadowed with exhaustion, but they burn with newfound purpose. As she prepares to leave her chambers, Esther takes one last look around the rooms that have been her sanctuary, the silk cushions where she has rested, the golden vessels from which she has eaten, the windows that have framed her protected view of the world. She may never see any of it again. Her final prayer is simple and desperate. God of my fathers, give me courage. Let the king's heart be moved toward mercy. Save your people through this weak vessel. The words echo in the silence of her chambers like a covenant between heaven and earth. With trembling hands, Esther adjusts her crown one last time. The jewels catch the afternoon light and throw rainbows on the walls. She looks every inch a queen, even though her knees shake with fear. Sometimes courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it. The door to her chambers opens like the mouth of destiny. Beyond lies the corridor that leads to the throne room. Beyond that waits a king who holds the power of life and death in his hands. Beyond that hangs the fate of a nation. Esther steps forward into history. risking her life. The corridors of the Persian palace stretch before Queen Esther like pathways to judgment. Each step echoes against marble walls that have witnessed countless royal dramas. Today they will witness another, perhaps the most crucial in the empire's history. Servants pause in their duties as the queen passes. Her beauty, refined by 3 days of fasting, catches their attention like flame draws moths. But something else surrounds her, an aura of purpose so intense it makes the air itself seem to tremble. The throne room doors loom ahead, massive and forbidding. Beyond them sits King Xerxes in all his power and glory. Beyond them waits either salvation or destruction. Esther pauses at the threshold, her hand resting against the cool stone wall. Persian law could not be clearer. Death awaits anyone who enters the king's presence uninvited. The only hope lies in royal mercy, symbolized by the golden scepter that the king might extend to grant life instead of death. But mercy cannot be demanded or predicted. It flows only from the king's pleasure. Esther thinks of Vashti, the queen who came before her. Royal favor had not saved her when she displeased the king. Palace walls hold no protection when royal anger strikes. Queens can fall as quickly as common servants when they overstep their bounds. But this knowledge no longer paralyzes Esther with fear. The 3-day fast has burned away her terror, leaving only steely resolve. Her people face extinction in less than 11 months. If she dies trying to save them, at least she will die with purpose. The guards at the throne room entrance recognize their queen but look confused by her unannounced arrival. They know the law as well as anyone. Their hands move instinctively toward their weapons, though they would never dare threaten royalty directly. "Open the doors," Esther commands, her voice carrying an authority that surprises even herself. The guards hesitate for a moment, then obey. The massive portals swing inward with a groan that sounds like the earth itself opening. Inside the throne room, King Xerxes sits upon his golden seat of power. Courtiers and advisors surround him in carefully arranged semicircles. Petitioners wait in neat lines to present their cases. The normal business of empire continues its stately pace. Then Queen Esther appears in the doorway, and everything stops. Conversations die mid-sentence. Heads turn in unison toward the unexpected figure. The king's own expression shifts from casual attention to sharp focus. A queen entering uninvited breaks every rule of palace protocol. Esther sees the shock ripple through the assembled courtiers. Some faces show sympathy for her predicament. Others reveal anticipation of royal drama. A few display barely concealed satisfaction at seeing another's downfall approach. But Esther's eyes focus only on her husband, the man who holds her fate in his hands. 3 years of marriage have taught her to read his moods with careful precision. Now she searches his face for any hint of his intentions. King Xerxes studies his wife with eyes that reveal nothing. The silence stretches like a bowstring drawn tight. Everyone in the throne room holds their breath, waiting for the king's decision. Will mercy triumph, or will law demand its due? Esther takes a single step forward into the throne room proper. The action transforms her from someone seeking entrance to someone claiming access. The distinction matters under Persian law. She has now officially entered the king's presence without invitation. The moment hangs suspended like a drop of water on a blade's edge. One word from the king will determine whether this ends in triumph or tragedy. One gesture will decide the fate of millions of Jews scattered across the empire. Then something shifts in the king's expression. Perhaps he sees the desperation carefully hidden beneath Esther's royal composure. Perhaps he notices how the fast has refined her beauty into something almost ethereal. Perhaps he simply remembers why he fell in love with her in the first place. King Xerxes lifts his hand, and in it gleams the golden scepter that holds the power of life and death. The courtiers watch in fascination as he extends it toward his queen. The gesture speaks louder than words. Mercy triumphs over law. Relief floods through Esther's body like warm wine. Her knees nearly buckle with the sudden release of tension. She has gambled with her life and won the first round. But this is only the beginning of a much more dangerous game. Following proper protocol, Esther approaches the throne and touches the tip of the golden scepter. The ritual contact seals the king's grant of mercy. She is safe from immediate execution. Now comes the harder task of explaining why she risked everything to gain his attention. "What is it, Queen Esther?" the king asks, his voice carrying both curiosity and genuine warmth. "What is your request? Even up to half the kingdom, it will be given to you." The generous offer reveals the king's mood more clearly than any other signal. He is pleased to see his queen, intrigued by her unprecedented action, and disposed to grant whatever favor she seeks. Esther's beauty and courage have touched his heart exactly as she hoped. But now comes the crucial moment. Esther must make her request in a way that maximizes her chances of success. She has planned her approach carefully during the long fast. Patience and subtlety will serve her better than desperate pleading. "If it pleases the king," she begins, her voice steady despite her racing heart, "let the king, together with Haman, come today to a banquet I have prepared for him." The request surprises everyone in the throne room. After such dramatic entrance, they expected urgent pleas or desperate confessions. Instead, the queen invites her husband to dinner. The anticlimax leaves courtiers murmuring among themselves. But Esther's invitation serves her purpose perfectly. It removes the discussion from public view to private chambers. It includes Haman, who must be present when she reveals his plot. Most importantly, it gives her time to prepare her words and gauge the king's mood more carefully. King Xerxes agrees immediately, clearly delighted by his wife's attention. "Bring Haman at once," he commands his servants, "so that we may do what Esther asks." As the king rises from his throne, Esther feels another wave of relief mixed with apprehension. She has survived the most dangerous moment, entering the royal presence uninvited. But greater challenges lie ahead. Tonight she must somehow convince her husband to reverse a decree he has already sealed with royal authority. The courtiers watch with fascination as the royal couple leaves the throne room together. Speculation buzzes through the palace like wildfire. What could have driven the queen to such desperate measures? What request requires such dramatic presentation? Only Esther knows the full truth. Tonight, over wine and delicate foods, she will reveal her secret identity. She will expose Haman's plot. She will plead for the lives of her people. The success or failure of her mission will determine whether millions live or die. The banquet awaits, and with it, the next chapter in a story that will echo through history. The first banquet. The royal dining chamber glows with warm lamplight as evening settles over Susa. Golden vessels catch and reflect the flames, creating a dance of light and shadow on painted walls. The air carries the scent of exotic spices and rare perfumes. Everything speaks of luxury and intimate royal favor. Queen Esther has prepared this banquet with meticulous care. Every detail serves her larger purpose. The foods are the king's favorites. The wine comes from his private reserves. The seating arrangement places her close enough to read his expressions while keeping Haman within easy conversation range. King Xerxes arrives in high spirits, clearly pleased by his wife's attention. The unexpected invitation has broken the routine of royal business and reminded him of the passion that first drew him to this remarkable woman. He settles onto his dining couch with evident satisfaction. Haman follows shortly after, his face glowing with pride. To be invited to a private dinner with the king and queen represents the highest possible honor. Only the most favored advisors receive such intimate access to royal company. His chest swells with self-importance as he takes his place at the table. The conversation flows as smoothly as the wine being poured. Esther plays the perfect hostess, drawing both men into comfortable discussion. She asks about affairs of state, listens to their concerns, and responds with just enough insight to demonstrate her intelligence without appearing threatening. King Xerxes relaxes visibly as the evening progresses. The cares of empire fade in the glow of domestic contentment. His queen's beauty, enhanced by her mysterious afternoon appearance, captivates him completely. Her attention feels like a precious gift after weeks of formal court interactions. Haman basks in the royal couple's company, interpreting their courtesy as deep friendship. He shares amusing stories from the provinces, reports on administrative successes, and offers opinions on various court matters. The wine loosens his tongue and inflates his ego even further. As servants present course after course of delicate foods, Esther watches both men carefully. She studies the king's moods, noting when he laughs most freely and when his attention focuses most intently. She observes Haman's reactions, cataloging his weaknesses and measuring his guard against future need. The queen's own appetite remains poor after 3 days of fasting, but she makes a show of enjoying the meal. Her performance must appear natural and relaxed. Any sign of distress might alert Haman to hidden motives or worry the king about her health. Conversation turns to various topics throughout the evening: trade routes through the empire, building projects in distant provinces, reports from military commanders on the frontiers, the normal concerns of rulers who govern vast territories and countless peoples. But underneath the pleasant surface, Esther's mind races with strategy. She has brought the two most powerful men in Persia together in private. The opportunity for revelation and confrontation lies within her grasp, yet timing remains crucial. One wrong word could destroy everything. As wine cups are refilled repeatedly, King Xerxes grows more expansive in his affection. His eyes linger on his queen with obvious admiration. His voice carries warmth reserved for intimate moments. The perfect moment for making requests seems to hover just out of reach. Finally, as the evening reaches its peak, the king leans toward it with wine-brightened eyes. "Now tell me, Queen Esther," he says with genuine interest, "what is your petition? It will be given to you. What is your request? Even up to half the kingdom, it will be granted." The moment Esther has been building toward arrives like dawn breaking over mountains. The king has offered her virtually anything she could desire. His generosity stems from wine, contentment, and renewed appreciation for her beauty and grace. The timing could not be more perfect, but Esther surprises everyone, including herself, with her response. Instead of seizing this golden opportunity, she hesitates. Some instinct deeper than conscious thought holds her back. Perhaps the presence of servants makes her cautious. Perhaps Haman's smug confidence suggests he needs to feel even more secure before his fall. Perhaps divine timing requires one more day of preparation. "My petition and my request is this," she begins carefully, watching both men's faces. "If the king regards me with favor, and if it pleases the king to grant my petition and fulfill my request, let the king and Haman come tomorrow to the banquet I shall prepare for them. Then I will answer the king's question." The response frustrates and intrigues her audience in equal measure. The king expected immediate revelation after such mysterious buildup. Haman anticipated learning what royal favor he has earned through this intimate dinner. Instead, both men must wait another day for satisfaction. Yet Esther's delay serves multiple purposes. It builds anticipation and ensures the king's continued attention. It gives her time to refine her approach based on tonight's observations. Most importantly, it allows Haman one more day to reveal his true character, and perhaps to make mistakes that will aid her cause. King Xerxes agrees readily, his curiosity clearly piqued by his wife's mysterious behavior. The promise of another private banquet pleases him immensely. He interprets her delay as feminine coyness rather than careful strategy. Haman practically glows with satisfaction as the evening concludes. 2 private dinners with the royal couple in consecutive nights exceeds his wildest dreams of advancement. He sees himself rising to heights of power that even he had not dared imagine. As the 3 participants prepare to leave the dining chamber, each carries different expectations for tomorrow's gathering. The king anticipates learning his wife's secret request. Haman expects further confirmation of his importance. Only Esther knows that tomorrow night will bring revelations that will shake the empire to its foundations. The queen retires to her chambers with mixed feelings about the evening's success. She has gained the king's attention and secured another opportunity for her plea. But she has also given Haman another day to solidify his position or potentially discover her true identity. The die is cast for tomorrow's banquet. Everything now depends on Esther's ability to choose the perfect moment and find the perfect words. The fate of a nation hangs on one woman's courage and one king's capacity for mercy. Haman's pride and rage. Haman leaves the royal banquet walking on air. His feet barely touch the marble floors as he makes his way through the palace corridors. Never in his wildest dreams had he imagined such honor. 2 private dinners with the king and queen in consecutive nights. The very thought makes his heart race with excitement. The night air feels sweet against his face as he steps into the palace courtyard. Stars shine overhead like scattered diamonds, and Haman imagines they celebrate his triumph. He is the most powerful man in the empire after the king himself. Now he enjoys the most intimate access to royal favor. What heights remain unconquered? His servants hurry to keep pace as Haman strides through Susa's streets toward his grand mansion. His step carries the confidence of a man who believes himself untouchable. Power courses through his veins like the finest wine. Every passerby who recognizes him bows deeply, and their deference feeds his swelling pride. But as Haman approaches the king's gate, his euphoria crashes into cruel reality. There sits Mordecai, still refusing to bow, still defying the order that all should worship Haman as the king's representative. The sight hits like a slap across the face. Even after the decree of death has been issued, even with destruction looming just months away, this stubborn Jew will not bend his knee. The insult burns hotter because it comes at the moment of Haman's greatest triumph. His joy sours instantly into bitter rage. Haman stops directly in front of Mordecai, his shadow falling across the seated figure like a dark prophecy. He waits for the bow that never comes. He expects the recognition that remains forever withheld. The silence stretches between them, heavy with mutual hatred. "Still you refuse," Haman whispers, his voice shaking with fury. "Even now, when your people face extinction, you will not show proper respect." His hands clench into fists at his sides. Violence seems to shimmer in the air between the two men. But Mordecai's response cuts deeper than any sword thrust. He looks up at Haman with eyes that hold no fear, no desperation, no plea for mercy. Instead, those ancient eyes carry something far more infuriating: pity. Pity for a man so small that he needs the worship of others to feel important. Haman tears himself away before his rage explodes into public violence. Such behavior would be beneath his dignity and might reach the king's ears. But the encounter poisons his triumph completely. What good is royal favor if one stubborn Jew can still make him feel powerless? He reaches his mansion in a black mood, his earlier joy completely evaporated. The grand house that usually fills him with pride now feels hollow. The expensive furnishings seem to mock his frustration. Even luxury cannot soothe the wound that Mordecai's defiance has torn in his spirit. Haman calls for his wife Zeresh and his closest friends to join him. He needs an audience for his complaints, witnesses to his importance, voices to affirm his greatness. The group gathers quickly, sensing their patron's volatile mood. "Let me tell you about my honor," Haman begins, his voice carrying forced brightness. He recounts his rise to power, his vast wealth, his many sons, his position as the king's most trusted advisor. The familiar litany usually comforts him, but tonight it rings hollow. He describes the evening's banquet in elaborate detail, the queen's personal invitation, the intimate setting, the king's obvious pleasure in his company. And tomorrow, he concludes with growing excitement, "I am invited again. No one else in the empire enjoys such favor." His audience murmurs appropriately, offering congratulations and expressing amazement at his good fortune. Their words should lift his spirits, but somehow they fail to reach the bitter core of his frustration. "Yet all this gives me no satisfaction," Haman admits with sudden honesty, "as long as I see that Jew Mordecai sitting at the king's gate." The confession reveals how completely one man's defiance has poisoned his enjoyment of everything else. The admission shocks his listeners. How can such small matters trouble a man of Haman's stature? Why should one individual's behavior matter when millions bow before his authority? The questions hang unspoken in the perfumed air of the mansion's reception hall. Zeresh, Haman's wife, recognizes the dangerous mood that grips her husband. She has seen him in such states before, when minor frustrations grow into consuming obsessions. Something must be done to restore his confidence before his rage destroys his judgment completely. "A gallows should be built," she suggests with cold calculation. 75 feet high. In the morning, ask the king to have Mordecai impaled on it. Then go with the king to the banquet and enjoy yourself. Her solution appeals to Haman's need for dramatic revenge. The suggestion electrifies Haman like lightning striking dry wood. A public execution would demonstrate his power beyond any doubt. Mordecai's death would remove the constant reminder of defiance. The height of the gallows would ensure that all Susa could witness his triumph. Haman's friends enthusiastically support the plan. They compete with each other in describing how fitting such punishment would be. Their words feed Haman's hunger for revenge until it becomes a raging fire that consumes all other thoughts. Yes, Haman declares with savage satisfaction, let it be built tonight. By dawn, the gallows will stand ready. By noon tomorrow, Mordecai will hang from it like a banner proclaiming my authority. His voice carries the fervor of a man who believes he has found the perfect solution. Orders go out immediately to skilled carpenters and construction workers. Money flows like water to ensure swift completion. The gallows must be ready before sunrise, tall enough to be seen from every corner of the city. Haman's revenge will be impossible to ignore. As hammers begin ringing through the night air, Haman's mood improves dramatically. The prospect of Mordecai's death soothes his wounded pride like healing balm. Tomorrow will bring perfect triumph, first the execution of his enemy, then another evening of royal favor. He retires to his chambers with visions of victory dancing in his head. The gallows rising in his courtyard seems like an altar to his greatness. Soon, every Jew in the empire will understand what happens to those who defy Haman's authority. Soon, even the memory of Mordecai's defiance will be erased by spectacular death. But Haman has made a crucial error in his calculations. He assumes that his favor with the king remains absolute. He believes that one more request will be granted as easily as all the others. He imagines that Mordecai's execution will proceed without complications. Most importantly, he has no idea that Queen Esther carries Jewish blood in her veins. The woman whose favor he celebrated tonight belongs to the very people he has marked for destruction. Tomorrow's banquet will bring revelations that will shatter his world more completely than any gallows could break a man's neck. Outside his windows, the sound of construction continues through the night. Wood rises toward the stars in a monument to pride and hatred. But sometimes the instruments of destruction become the very means of divine justice. Sometimes the trap we build for others becomes the snare that catches us instead. The gallows grows higher with each passing hour, and with it grows the irony that will soon unfold. The king's sleepless night. In the royal bedchamber of King Xerxes, sleep refuses to come. The monarch tosses and turns on his sumptuous bed, his mind restless despite the late hour. Perhaps the wine from dinner has made him wakeful. Perhaps excitement about tomorrow's banquet keeps his thoughts spinning. Perhaps something deeper troubles his spirit. The king's sleepless nights are rare but not unknown. The weight of governing a vast empire sometimes presses too heavily on even the strongest shoulders. 3 continents bow to his authority. Millions of people depend on his decisions. The responsibility can make rest elusive. Xerxes rises from his bed and paces the chamber's marble floors. His bare feet make no sound on the cool stone. Through tall windows, he can see Susa sleeping peacefully under starlight. His city rests while their king wrestles with unnamed anxieties. A thought occurs to him. Perhaps reading will help pass the sleepless hours. The royal library contains scrolls from across the known world, but one collection particularly interests him tonight. The official chronicles of his reign lie nearby, detailed records of every significant event during his rule. Bring me the book of Chronicles, he commands a servant who waits in the shadows. The record of memorable deeds during my reign. The man hurries to obey, returning with several heavy scrolls that contain the empire's recent history. The king settles into a comfortable chair as lamplight flickers across the ancient papyrus. He begins to read, hoping the familiar accounts will quiet his troubled mind. Names and dates flow past his eyes like a river of memory. Battles won and lost, treaties signed and broken, the endless details of imperial administration. Then one entry catches his attention with surprising force. The account describes a plot against the royal life, uncovered and reported by a man named Mordecai. 2 of the king's own eunuchs, Bigthana and Teresh, had planned assassination. Only Mordecai's vigilance and courage had saved the royal life. Xerxes reads the passage twice, then a third time. The details emerge clearly from the careful scribal writing. Mordecai had discovered the conspiracy and reported it through Queen Esther. The plotters had been arrested, questioned, and executed. The king's life had been saved by the alert action of this Jewish official. A frown creases the royal brow as memory struggles to surface. The king recalls the incident vaguely. It seems like years ago now. 2 servants plotting treason, quick investigation, and swift justice. But something about the account troubles him. What honor and recognition did Mordecai receive for this? He asks the servant who brought the chronicles. The question hangs in the lamplit air like incense waiting to be answered. The servant checks the records carefully, running his finger along the written lines. His search grows longer and more careful as he realizes what the king suspects. Finally, he looks up with obvious embarrassment. "Nothing has been done for him, Your Majesty," the man admits reluctantly. No reward was given, no recognition was recorded. The admission falls into silence like a stone dropped into deep water. King Xerxes feels a sharp stab of royal guilt. A man saves the king's life and receives nothing in return? Such ingratitude violates every principle of proper kingship. Honor should flow to those who serve faithfully. Rewards should match the magnitude of service rendered. The oversight troubles Xerxes more than it should, perhaps because his sleepless mind magnifies every concern. But the guilt is real and justified. Mordecai deserves recognition for his loyal service. The debt should have been paid long ago. The king's restless energy finds new focus in this discovery. Perhaps correcting this injustice will ease whatever unnamed anxiety keeps sleep at bay. Perhaps honoring faithful service will restore the cosmic balance that good kingship requires. "Is anyone in the court?" Xerxes asks suddenly. The late hour makes attendance unlikely, but perhaps some officials remain on duty. Royal business never completely stops, even in the depths of night. The servant investigates and returns with interesting news. "Haman is in the court, Your Majesty." The Prime Minister's presence at such an unusual hour suggests urgent business or exceptional dedication to duty. Actually, Haman waits in the court for quite different reasons. The gallows in his courtyard nears completion, and impatience drives him to seek immediate audience with the king. He wants to request Mordecai's execution first thing in the morning, before any other business can intervene. But Haman remains unaware of the chronicles the king has been reading. He knows nothing of the royal discovery or the debt that troubles the royal conscience. He enters the king's presence expecting to deliver death, not knowing that he walks into a conversation about honor. "Haman," the king begins without preamble, "what should be done for the man the king delights to honor?" The question emerges from the monarch's sleepless contemplations about Mordecai's unrewarded service. The timing creates perfect dramatic irony. Haman arrives planning to request one man's death and instead receives a question about another man's honor. The very person he wants to destroy is the very person the king wants to reward. But Haman completely misunderstands the situation. His ego, inflated by the evening's banquet and dreams of tomorrow's triumph, leads him to an obvious conclusion. Surely the king refers to him. Who else deserves royal honor? Who else has earned such distinction? The question seems like confirmation of everything Haman has dreamed. The king plans some great recognition, some public display of favor that will elevate him above all other officials. His heart races with anticipation as he considers the possibilities. "For the man the king delights to honor," Haman begins eagerly, his voice thick with excitement about his own anticipated reward. He proceeds to describe the most elaborate recognition he can imagine, never suspecting that his words will soon return to torment him. The irony builds like storm clouds gathering on a clear horizon. Two men stand in the royal chamber, each thinking about a different person entirely. The king considers how to honor Mordecai. Haman dreams of honoring himself. Neither understands what the other really means. Meanwhile, in his courtyard, Haman's gallows rises higher into the night sky. The wooden structure grows toward completion, awaiting its intended victim. But fate and divine justice have their own plans for the morning ahead. The sleepless night that began with royal restlessness will end with royal discovery. The king's insomnia becomes the instrument of perfect timing. Sometimes the things that trouble our rest serve purposes we cannot see until morning light reveals their meaning. Dawn approaches Susa with secrets ready to unfold. Irony served cold. The morning sun rises over Susa like divine justice breaking across the world. In the royal palace, King Xerxes listens with growing amazement as Haman describes the elaborate honors he believes he deserves. The prime minister's voice grows thick with anticipation as he outlines his fantasy of recognition. "Let a royal robe be brought," Haman suggests eagerly, "one the king has worn, and a horse the king has ridden, one with a royal crest placed on its head." His imagination runs wild with visions of himself draped in royal garments and mounted on the king's own steed. The irony cuts deep as Haman unknowingly designs his own humiliation. Every detail he suggests will soon apply to the very man he wants to destroy. Every honor he craves will be given to his greatest enemy. The perfect punishment emerges from his own mouth. Then let the robe and horse be entrusted to one of the king's most noble princes, Haman continues, his voice rising with excitement. Let them robe the man the king delights to honor, and lead him on the horse through the city streets, proclaiming before him, "This is what is done for the man the king delights to honor." King Xerxes nods thoughtfully as Haman finishes his elaborate description. The suggestion seems fitting for the man who saved the royal life. Public recognition will announce to the entire empire that loyal service receives proper reward. The spectacle will restore the balance that royal negligence had disturbed. "Excellent," the king declares with satisfaction. "Go at once, get the robe and the horse, and do just as you have suggested for Mordecai the Jew, who sits at the king's gate. Do not neglect anything you have recommended." The words hit Haman like physical blows. His face drains of color as the full horror of the situation becomes clear. The man the king delights to honor is not Haman himself, but his mortal enemy. The elaborate ceremony he designed will become his own public humiliation. For a moment, Haman cannot speak. His throat works soundlessly as shock paralyzes his voice. The beautiful morning suddenly feels cold as winter. The bright palace chambers seem to darken around him like a tomb closing. "Your Majesty," Haman manages to whisper, "surely there has been some mistake." But even as he speaks, he knows the king's decision is final. Royal commands cannot be questioned or delayed. Persian law demands immediate obedience. "No mistake," King Xerxes responds firmly. "Mordecai served me faithfully when he uncovered the plot against my life. Justice demands that such service be recognized publicly. See that it is done exactly as you described." The king's tone makes clear that no argument will be entertained. Haman must either obey the royal command or face charges of disobedience that could cost him everything. His trap has closed around him with perfect precision. Haman stumbles from the royal presence like a man walking in a nightmare. His legs feel weak beneath him. His carefully constructed world crumbles with each step he takes toward this impossible task. The morning that should have brought Mordecai's execution will instead bring Mordecai's exaltation. In his courtyard, the completed gallows stands 75 feet high, ready for its intended victim. The wooden structure that was built for Mordecai's death now seems to mock Haman's impotence. How quickly fortune's wheel can turn, lifting the humble and casting down the proud. Servants hurry to obey Haman's reluctant orders. They bring the royal robe, woven from the finest silk and purple dyed with precious murex shells. They lead out the king's own horse, its coat gleaming like polished bronze, its royal crest glinting in the morning sun. The preparations draw curious crowds in the palace courtyard. Word spreads quickly through Susa's streets that some great ceremony is about to unfold. Citizens gather along the route, eager to witness whatever spectacle approaches. Meanwhile, Mordecai still sits at the king's gate in sackcloth and ashes. His 3-day fast continues in solidarity with Queen Esther's desperate mission. He knows nothing of the night's developments or the honor that approaches like dawn breaking over mountains. When Haman appears leading the royal horse, Mordecai looks up in confusion. The prime minister's face shows a mixture of rage and despair that makes no sense in the morning light. Why would Haman approach with such obvious anguish written across his features? "Mordecai," Haman says through gritted teeth, each word torn from his throat like pieces of his soul. "The king commands that you be honored for your faithful service." The admission tastes like poison on his tongue. Mordecai's eyes widen as servants strip away his mourning clothes and drape the royal robe around his shoulders. The transformation seems miraculous, from condemned mourner to honored hero in the space of heartbeats. Divine timing reveals itself in ways beyond human planning. The royal horse stands ready, and Haman must personally assist Mordecai in mounting. His hands shake with suppressed fury as he helps his enemy into the saddle. The man he wanted to hang now sits above him in royal splendor. The procession begins its journey through Susa's main streets. Haman walks ahead of the horse, his voice carrying the required proclamation to growing crowds of spectators. This is what is done for the man the king delights to honor. Each repetition of the phrase cuts deeper into Haman's pride. His own words become instruments of torture, proclaiming his enemy's greatness to the entire city. The crowds cheer and applaud, adding to his humiliation with their obvious approval. Mordecai rides in stunned silence, overwhelmed by the sudden reversal of fortune. Yesterday he sat in sackcloth expecting death. Today he wears royal robes and receives public honor. The God of his fathers works in mysterious ways that human minds cannot fathom. The procession makes its way through every major street in Susa. Merchants abandon their stalls to watch, children run alongside the royal horse, women lean from windows to catch glimpses of the extraordinary sight. The entire city witnesses Haman's public defeat. At each intersection, Haman's voice grows hoarser as he continues the required proclamation. His throat burns with unshed tears of rage. His feet drag with each step as exhaustion wars with fury in his battered spirit. Finally, the ceremony ends where it began, at the king's gate. Mordecai dismounts and returns to his place, though he no longer wears sackcloth. The royal robe has been replaced by clean garments, more appropriate to his station. Haman flees toward his house like a man escaping from battlefield defeat. His head is covered in shame, his spirit broken by the morning's cruel reversals. The crowds that witnessed his humiliation will remember this day for years to come. At home, Zeresh and his friends wait eagerly for news of Mordecai's execution. Instead, they see their patron return in obvious distress, his face twisted with anguish and his confidence completely shattered. When Haman recounts the morning's events, his listeners fall silent with shock. The gallows stands ready in the courtyard, but its intended victim has received royal honor instead of royal justice. The irony seems too perfect to be mere coincidence. Since Mordecai, before whom your downfall has started, is of Jewish origin, Zeresh says with sudden insight, you cannot stand against him. You will surely come to ruin. Her words carry the weight of prophecy, revealing truths that pride had hidden. Before Haman can respond to this ominous warning, royal servants arrive at his door. Come quickly, they announce. The queen's banquet is ready and the king awaits your presence. The timing could not be more perfect or more terrible. Haman must transition immediately from his greatest humiliation to what should be his greatest honor. But Zeresh's words echo in his mind like thunder rolling across distant mountains. Tonight's banquet awaits, and with it revelations that will complete the destruction that this morning has begun. The second banquet evening, shadows gather over Susa as the royal dining chamber prepares for its second consecutive night of intimate ceremony. Queen Esther has arranged everything with even greater care than before. Tonight will bring no delays, no mysterious postponements. Tonight she will reveal everything or die in the attempt. The golden vessels gleam more brightly in the lamplight. The wines flow more freely from precious amphoras. The foods display more artistry in their preparation. Every detail speaks of a hostess determined to create the perfect atmosphere for momentous conversation. King Xerxes arrives in excellent spirits, still pleased by the morning's ceremony honoring Mordecai. The public recognition of faithful service has satisfied his sense of royal justice. Now he looks forward to learning what request has prompted his queen's mysterious behavior. Haman enters the dining chamber like a man walking to his own funeral. The morning's humiliation has shattered his confidence completely. His face shows traces of the despair that consumed him after leading Mordecai through Susa's streets in royal splendor. But royal etiquette demands that Haman mask his true feelings. He forces smiles and offers polite conversation despite the turmoil raging in his spirit. The effort exhausts him before the evening has properly begun. Queen Esther watches both men with careful attention. She notes the king's relaxed mood and Haman's obvious distress. The morning's events have created perfect conditions for what must follow. Divine timing has prepared the stage for her revelation. The meal progresses with surface pleasantry masking deeper currents of tension. Esther plays her role as gracious hostess while her heart pounds with anticipation. The king enjoys the food and wine while his curiosity grows stronger. Haman struggles to maintain composure while doom approaches like gathering storm clouds. As servants clear away the final course, King Xerxes leans toward his wife with wine-brightened eyes. The moment for truth has arrived at last. No more delays will be tolerated. No more mysterious postponements will satisfy royal curiosity. Now then, Queen Esther, he says with gentle authority, what is your petition? It will be given to you. What is your request? Even up to half the kingdom, it will be granted. The generous offer reveals his continued affection and his growing impatience for answers. Esther takes a deep breath that seems to draw strength from the very air around her. 3 days of fasting have prepared her for this moment. Months of hidden identity have led to this revelation. The fate of millions hangs on the words she speaks next. If I have found favor with you, your majesty, she begins, her voice steady despite her racing heart, and if it pleases the king, grant me my life, this is my petition, and spare my people, this is my request. The words fall into silence like stones cast into deep water. King Xerxes stares at his wife in complete confusion. Her life? Her people? What possible threat could endanger the beloved queen of Persia? The questions multiply faster than answers. Esther continues before the king can respond, her voice growing stronger as truth pours from her like water from a broken dam. For I and my people have been sold to be destroyed, killed, and annihilated. If we had merely been sold as male and female slaves, I would have kept quiet because no such distress would justify disturbing the king. The revelation strikes King Xerxes like a physical blow. His wife faces death, her people face extinction. The comfortable world of palace luxury suddenly reveals hidden horrors that make his blood run cold. Who is he? The king demands, his voice rising with royal fury. Where is he, the man who has dared to do such a thing? The questions explode from him like arrows shot from a powerful bow. Haman's face turns white as marble as understanding begins to dawn. The queen speaks of people marked for destruction. She mentions threats against her own life. The connections form in his mind like chains binding him to inevitable doom. Queen Esther extends her arm toward Haman with the gesture of final accusation. Her finger points at him like divine judgment made visible in human flesh. The moment of revelation arrives with devastating force. An adversary and enemy, she declares, her voice ringing with authority that silences even the king. This vile Haman! The name falls from her lips like a curse pronounced against evil itself. Terror grips Haman's heart with icy fingers. The woman he has dined with twice, the queen whose favor he has celebrated, belongs to the very people he has marked for extinction. The irony cuts deeper than any sword ever forged. King Xerxes rises from his dining couch in towering rage. The pieces of the puzzle fall into place with horrible clarity. The decree he signed without reading carefully. The genocide authorized against unknown people. The evil that has been planned in his name while he remained ignorant of its true nature. The king storms from the dining chamber into the palace garden, his mind reeling with fury and betrayal. He needs air to breathe, space to think, time to absorb the enormity of what has been revealed. His trusted advisor has manipulated him into authorizing the murder of his own wife. Left alone with Queen Esther, Haman realizes that his life hangs by the thinnest of threads. Royal favor has vanished like morning mist. The woman he helped condemn to death now holds his fate in her delicate hands. Desperation drives Haman to actions that will seal his doom. He throws himself down beside the queen's dining couch, grasping at her robes in frantic supplication. Please, your majesty, he begs, his voice breaking with terror. Spare my life. I did not know. I never intended harm to you personally. His pleas fall on ears deafened by the magnitude of his crimes. Esther looks down at the man who would have destroyed her people with cold judgment in her eyes. The time for mercy has passed like shadows fleeing before dawn. When King Xerxes returns from the garden, his fury has crystallized into deadly purpose. But the sight that greets him ignites fresh rage beyond anything he has yet experienced. Haman appears to be assaulting the queen, his hands grasping at her person in obvious desperation. Will he even molest the queen while she is with me in the house? The king roars with voice like thunder rolling across mountains. The accusation seals Haman's fate more completely than any trial could accomplish. Palace guards respond instantly to their monarch's rage. They move toward Haman with hands on their weapons, ready to enforce whatever justice the king demands. The man who rose so high will fall even further. As the guards seize Haman and drag him away from the queen's couch, one of them speaks the words that will echo through history. "A gallows 75 feet high stands by Haman's house," he reports with grim satisfaction. He had it made for Mordecai, who spoke up to help the king. The irony achieves perfect completion. The instrument of murder that Haman built for his enemy will become the means of his own execution. Divine justice uses the very trap he prepared to accomplish his destruction. King Xerxes wastes no time on lengthy deliberation. "Hang him on it," he commands with finality that admits no appeal. The sentence emerges from royal lips like fate itself speaking through human voice. As guards drag Haman away to his richly deserved doom, King Xerxes turns back to his wife with expressions of amazement and growing love. She has revealed herself as a woman of incredible courage, willing to risk everything to save her people from destruction. The evening that began with careful pretense ends with complete truth revealed. Queen Esther's secret identity no longer burdens her conscience. The king's trust has been betrayed, but also purified by painful revelation. Evil has been exposed, and justice has begun its terrible work. But even as Haman faces his final moments, the decree he authored still stands as law throughout the empire. The 13th of Adar still approaches like an appointment with death. Queen Esther has won this battle, but the war for her people's survival has only just begun. Haman's fall. The great hall falls silent. Haman drops to his knees beside Queen Esther's couch, his hands reaching toward her in desperation. The man who once commanded armies now begs for mercy from the woman he tried to destroy. His voice cracks as he pleads. The golden chains of office hang loose around his neck. Sweat dampens his fine robes. This is not the proud vizier who walked tall through palace corridors just hours before. Esther sits perfectly still. Her dark eyes watch him without speaking. She knows this moment will decide everything. The king has stormed from the room in rage, leaving them alone in the flickering lamplight. Outside in the garden, Xerxes paces among the cypress trees. His mind spins with the weight of betrayal. His most trusted advisor has deceived him. His beloved queen faces death because of a law he signed without thinking. The cool evening air does nothing to calm his fury. How could he have been so blind? How could Haman have played him so easily? The king who rules from India to Ethiopia has been made a fool in his own palace. Back inside, Haman's desperation grows. He reaches out to touch Esther's arm, hoping to move her heart to pity. In Persian law, touching the queen without permission means death, but fear makes men do foolish things. The king returns at exactly the wrong moment. He sees Haman leaning over his wife, hands extended toward her. In Xerxes' mind, this looks like an attack on the queen herself. Will he even assault the queen while she is with me in the house? The king's voice booms through the chamber like thunder before a storm. The words seal Haman's fate. Guards appear as if from nowhere. They move swiftly and silently, covering Haman's face with a dark cloth. In Persian custom, this marks a man condemned to die. Harbona, one of the king's trusted servants, steps forward. His voice is steady and sure. There is a gallows 50 cubits high at Haman's house. He made it for Mordecai, who spoke good on behalf of the king. The irony cuts through the air like a blade. Haman built his own instrument of death. The trap he set for another will now claim his own life. Xerxes does not hesitate. Hang him on it. The words come out flat and final. No appeal will be heard. No mercy will be shown. They lead Haman away through corridors he once ruled. Servants who bowed to him now turn their faces. The golden halls that echoed with his laughter become his path to doom. The news spreads through Susa like wildfire. In the streets, people whisper in amazement. The mighty have fallen. The proud have been brought low. Justice moves in mysterious ways through the Persian night. At Haman's house, the gallows stands ready. 50 cubits high, it towers over the courtyard like a dark monument to pride and hatred. Workers built it strong, never knowing it would claim their master's life. Haman's family watches in horror from their windows. His 10 sons see their father's shame. His wife remembers her own words urging him to build this gallows. Fear grips every heart in that house. The execution happens swiftly. By morning, Haman the Agagite hangs dead on the wooden beam he crafted for another man. The empire's second most powerful man becomes a warning to all who would abuse their trust. In the palace, Esther sits quietly in her chambers. The immediate danger has passed, but the larger threat remains. Haman is dead, yet his decree still stands. Across the empire, the 13th of Adar still looms like a storm on the horizon. Mordecai receives word of Haman's death while still wearing sackcloth at the palace gate. Relief washes over him, but he knows the battle is only half won. The king's seal cannot be broken. The law cannot be changed. Dawn breaks over Susa with a strange mixture of hope and fear. The tyrant is gone, but his legacy lives on in parchment and ink. The Jewish people remain marked for death by a law that seemed unbreakable. Yet something has shifted in the cosmic balance. Evil has faced judgment. Truth has found its voice. The God of Israel moves through human affairs in ways both seen and unseen. The aftermath of Haman morning light streams through the palace windows as King Xerxes makes his first decree of the new day. Haman's vast estate, built on years of corruption and greed, now belongs to Queen Esther. The transfer happens with stunning speed. Treasury officials arrive at Haman's mansion with scrolls and seals. They inventory gold, silver, precious stones, and land stretching across multiple provinces. The wealth of the empire's most corrupt official becomes the queen's property. Esther accepts this gift with grace, knowing it represents more than mere riches. The king shows his trust by placing such wealth in her hands. More importantly, she sees opportunity in these resources. She summons Mordecai to the palace immediately. For the first time since she became queen, her cousin walks through the royal gates openly. No more secret messages passed through servants. No more coded conversations in shadowy corridors. Mordecai enters the throne room wearing fresh robes instead of sackcloth. His beard is trimmed, his face washed clean of ashes, yet his eyes still carry the weight of his people's danger. The king greets him warmly, remembering how this man once saved the royal life. Xerxes removes his own signet ring, the same ring Haman wore with such pride. Without ceremony, he places it on Mordecai's finger. The meaning is clear to everyone present. Mordecai now holds the power Haman once wielded. The Jewish exile becomes the empire's second in command. The man who refused to bow now stands at the king's right hand. Esther immediately appoints Mordecai to manage Haman's former estate. The irony satisfies something deep in the Persian sense of justice. The man who was meant to hang will now live in his enemy's house. But neither Esther nor Mordecai feels like celebrating. Haman's death solves only half their problem. The decree still exists, sealed with the king's authority. In less than 11 months, every Jewish person in the empire faces legal slaughter. Persian law creates this cruel trap. What the king has sealed cannot be unsealed. What bears his ring cannot be broken. The machinery of government moves forward regardless of changed hearts or new understanding. News of Haman's death spreads across the empire's roads. Couriers carry word from province to province. In Jewish communities, people feel a moment of hope before remembering their continuing peril. Some enemies of the Jewish people also hear this news with growing concern. They had expected easy victims when Adar arrived. Now they wonder if the situation has changed more than they realized. In Susa's marketplace, merchants discuss the dramatic reversal. Persian culture loves stories of proud men brought low by their own schemes. Haman's fall becomes the subject of songs and stories told around evening fires. Mordecai settles into his new role with quiet dignity. He does not gloat over his enemy's defeat or parade his newfound power. Instead, he focuses on the work ahead. Saving his people requires wisdom, not celebration. The palace bureaucracy adjusts quickly to their new master. Officials who once competed for Haman's attention now seek audiences with Mordecai. They find him more approachable, but equally decisive. Esther uses her new wealth strategically. She supports Jewish communities throughout the empire with food and supplies. Her generosity builds networks of loyalty that will prove valuable in the coming crisis. Royal scribes update the official records. Haman's name is struck from the rolls of honor. His titles transfer to Mordecai. His property becomes the crown's gift to the queen. History begins to forget the man who almost destroyed a nation, yet the decree remains. Parchment and ink prove more durable than flesh and blood. The law Haman crafted in hatred continues its countdown toward the 13th of Adar. Xerxes begins to understand the full scope of what he approved so carelessly. His queen belongs to the people he condemned. His new vizier leads the community marked for death. The king's own household now contains the targets of his decree. The Persian Empire's vast machinery cannot simply stop or reverse. Too many copies of the decree exist in too many provinces. Too many officials have prepared for its execution. The king's word, once given, takes on a life of its own. But Esther and Mordecai know something about their God that Haman never understood. The Lord of Israel specializes in impossible situations. When human law creates hopeless traps, divine wisdom finds unexpected doors. Esther pleads again. The golden scepter feels heavier in Xerxes' hand as he watches his queen approach the throne. Esther moves with careful grace across the polished marble floor, her silk robes whispering secrets with each step. She does not come as a petitioner this time. The urgency in her dark eyes speaks of deeper desperation. Her people still face destruction, despite Haman's death. The decree remains like a sword hanging over every Jewish neck in the empire. Esther falls at the king's feet, her composure finally breaking. Tears stream down her face as she speaks. The woman who faced death with such courage now weeps openly before the man she loves. If it pleases the king, and if I have found favor in his sight, let an order be written to revoke the letters devised by Haman. Her voice trembles with emotion she can no longer contain. The king's heart breaks watching her pain. This woman who brought such joy to his life now suffers because of his own thoughtless decision. He wants to grant her request immediately, but Persian law binds even kings. The decree that was written in the king's name and sealed with the king's ring cannot be revoked. Xerxes speaks these words with genuine sorrow. The very power that makes him mighty also makes him helpless in this moment. Persian legal tradition stretches back generations. What the king seals becomes as permanent as mountains or rivers. To break such laws would shatter the empire's foundation of order and predictability. Esther understands this reality, but understanding does not ease her anguish. She sees her people scattered across 127 provinces, all marked for death by ink and parchment. Men, women, children, elderly, none will be spared when Adar arrives. The throne room falls silent except for the queen's quiet sobs. Ministers and courtiers look away, uncomfortable witnessing such raw grief. Even hardened palace officials feel moved by her desperate plea. But Xerxes is a king before he is a husband. He built his power on the unchanging nature of Persian law. To revoke one decree might encourage others to question royal authority. The empire's stability depends on absolute respect for the king's word. Yet love finds ways around the hardest obstacles. If one law cannot be changed, perhaps another law can balance the scales. If the decree cannot be revoked, maybe a new decree can offer protection. The king's mind begins working through possibilities. Persian legal scholars have spent centuries finding ways around seemingly impossible situations. Surely they can craft something to help the Jewish people defend themselves. You may write as you please with regard to the Jews, in the name of the king, and seal it with the king's ring. His words carry both hope and limitation. The original decree stands, but room exists for a response. Esther's tears stop as she grasps the meaning. Her people cannot escape the attack, but they might gain the right to fight back. Persian law will allow the Jewish communities to defend themselves when Adar comes. This solution offers no guarantee of safety, but it transforms certain death into possible survival. Instead of helpless victims, the Jewish people can become warriors fighting for their families and faith. Mordecai is summoned immediately to help craft this new decree. His knowledge of both Persian law and Jewish communities makes him invaluable for writing effective protection. Every word must be chosen with care. The royal scribes prepare their materials. Fresh parchment, the finest ink, and the king's own seal wait ready. This document must be perfect because lives depend on its clarity and strength. Word spreads through the palace that something important is happening. Servants whisper in corridors about the queen's tears and the king's response. Hope begins to stir in Jewish hearts throughout Susa. Esther rises from the marble floor, wiping away the last of her tears. She has done what she could. Now the fate of her people rests in the hands of God and the skill of Persian legal experts. The afternoon sun slants through the throne room windows as work begins on the counter decree. Each phrase is debated, each clause examined for loopholes or weakness. The Jewish people will get only one chance to make this law work. Outside in the empire's vast territories, communities remain unaware of these palace discussions. They continue their daily routines while death approaches on the calendar. Some have given up hope entirely, while others pray for miracles they cannot imagine. But in the halls of power, impossible things begin to take shape. A king's love for his queen opens doors that seemed permanently sealed. Persian law finds flexibility in the face of genuine need. The decree cannot be revoked, but it can be answered. The Jewish people cannot avoid the fight, but they will not face it defenseless. Sometimes salvation comes not through escape, but through the courage to stand and defend what matters most. The second decree, royal scribes bend over their writing tables as dawn breaks over Susa. The smell of fresh ink fills the chamber where Mordecai dictates the most important document of his life. Every word could mean the difference between survival and destruction for his people. By these letters, the king granted the Jews who were in every city to gather themselves together and to stand for their lives. The phrases flow carefully from his lips while scribes capture each syllable with perfect accuracy. This new decree must work within Persian law while giving real protection to Jewish communities. Mordecai chooses his words like a general positioning troops for battle. The language needs to be clear enough for distant governors to understand, yet strong enough to provide genuine defense. King Xerxes watches the process with growing respect for his new vizier. Mordecai shows the same careful wisdom that once saved the royal life. The man understands both law and strategy in ways that will serve the empire well. To destroy, to slay, and to cause to perish all the power of the people and province that would assault them, both little ones and women, and to take the spoil of them for a prey. The authorization is comprehensive and decisive. The scribes work with unusual speed. Time presses against them like a physical weight. The 13th day of Adar draws closer with each sunrise. Every day of delay means less preparation time for scattered Jewish communities. Multiple copies must be prepared for the empire's vast network of provinces. Each document requires perfect accuracy. A single mistake in translation or transcription could leave an entire region defenseless when the attack comes. Mordecai insists on reviewing every copy personally. His eyes scan each line of text, checking for errors or unclear phrasing. The responsibility for his people's lives rests heavily on his shoulders. The king's seal is pressed into warm wax on each document. The same ring that authorized Jewish destruction now authorizes Jewish defense. Persian law maintains its balance through this careful dance of opposing forces. Royal couriers prepare for the fastest journey of their careers. They will carry these decrees on the empire's best horses, changing mounts at every station. The Persian postal system, designed for royal communications, now serves to save lives. And the writing was written in the name of King Ahasuerus and sealed with the king's ring. The formula carries the full weight of imperial authority. No governor or local official can ignore or modify these orders. The decree goes forth in every language of the empire. Persian, Aramaic, Greek, and dozens of local tongues carry the same message. Jewish communities will hear the news in words they can understand perfectly. Word spreads through Susa's streets as the first couriers depart. Palace servants whisper to merchants who tell customers, who carry news to their families. Hope begins to replace despair in Jewish hearts throughout the capital. Mordecai emerges from the palace wearing royal robes of blue and white, with a great crown of gold and a garment of fine linen and purple. The visual message is unmistakable. The Jewish people now have a protector at the highest levels of government. The city of Susa rejoices at the sight. People who witnessed the earlier morning now see reasons for celebration. The same streets that echoed with weeping now ring with songs of praise and thanksgiving. Couriers fan out across the empire's vast road network. They carry sealed documents that will transform the coming conflict from massacre to battle. The Jewish people cannot avoid the fight, but they will not face it alone or unprepared. In distant provinces, Jewish communities still live under the shadow of approaching death. They do not yet know that help races toward them on swift horses. Their prayers continue to rise like incense while salvation gallops across desert and mountain. Persian governors prepare to receive new instructions from their king. They expect routine administrative matters, not revolutionary changes to existing law. The surprise will be complete when they break the royal seals. The decree allows Jewish communities to gather themselves together. This simple phrase carries enormous strategic importance. Scattered families can unite for mutual defense. Isolated individuals can join larger groups for better protection. It authorizes them to stand for their lives against any who would attack them. Persian law now protects Jewish self-defense as a royal right. Local officials must support these efforts rather than hinder them. The permission to take the spoil provides economic incentive for successful defense. Victory will bring material reward along with survival. This clause might also discourage some potential attackers who now risk losing their own property. As the sun sets over Susa, the first day of the new decree ends with cautious optimism. Haman's law still stands like a storm cloud on the horizon, but Jewish people no longer face it defenseless. Persian justice has found a way to balance the scales, mobilizing the Jewish resistance. The thundering of hooves echoes across mountain passes as royal couriers push their horses to the limit. Each rider carries copies of the king's new decree sealed in leather pouches. Behind them, hope races against time towards scattered Jewish communities. In the province of Media, the courier arrives at the governor's palace just as evening prayers begin. Dust covers his clothes and exhaustion lines his face, but his mission drives him forward. The official seal breaks with a sharp crack in the lamplight. The governor reads with growing amazement. This decree changes everything he thought he knew about the approaching 13th of Adar. Instead of supervising a massacre, he must now ensure Jewish communities receive protection for self-defense. Word spreads through the Jewish quarter of the provincial capital before dawn. Families emerge from their homes with expressions of disbelief and growing joy. The news seems too good to be true after months of despair. Elderly men who remember stories of past persecutions shake their heads in wonder. Young fathers who feared for their children's lives begin planning defense instead of funerals. Mothers who have wept in secret now dare to hope openly. The community's leaders gather in the synagogue to discuss strategy. The decree grants them legal rights, but they must organize quickly to make those rights meaningful. Time remains short before their enemies will test Persian steel against Jewish resolve. Similar scenes unfold across the empire's vast territories. In Egypt, Babylon, Greece, and India, Jewish communities receive the same stunning news. The king who condemned them now authorizes their defense through the wisdom of Queen Esther and Mordecai. Some communities begin organizing immediately. Men who know warfare take charge of training others. Women prepare supplies and medical care. Children are moved to safer locations while adults prepare for battle. Other Jewish settlements react more cautiously. Years of persecution have taught them to distrust sudden changes in official policy. They study the decree carefully, looking for hidden traps or dangerous loopholes. But the document's language leaves no room for doubt. The king's seal carries absolute authority throughout the Persian Empire. Local officials who ignore these orders risk their own positions and possibly their lives. Persian governors find themselves in awkward positions. Many received Haman's original decree with private satisfaction, expecting easy opportunities to eliminate Jewish merchants who competed with local businesses. Now they must protect those same communities. Practical preparations begin in earnest as the news spreads. Jewish metalworkers start forging weapons. Farmers hide their livestock and grain supplies. Merchants convert their wealth into portable forms in case quick escape becomes necessary. The synagogues become centers of both prayer and planning. Religious leaders organize fasting and supplication, while military veterans teach sword techniques and archery. Sacred and secular activities blend in the face of approaching danger. Some non-Jewish neighbors watch these preparations with growing concern. They had expected easy victories when Adar arrived, perhaps gaining Jewish property or settling old grudges. Now they face organized resistance backed by royal authority. Others feel relieved by the new development. They never supported Haman's plan, but felt powerless to oppose it. The king's change of policy gives them permission to remain neutral or even support their Jewish neighbors. Regional commanders receive urgent messages from the capital explaining the new situation. Military units that might have enforced the original decree now prepare to maintain order during the coming conflict. The army's role shifts from persecution to peacekeeping. Jewish communities begin reaching out to each other across provincial boundaries. Ancient networks of communication, built through centuries of trade and marriage, now serve to coordinate defense plans. Information flows along caravan routes and shipping lanes. In some regions, local rulers offer additional protection beyond what the king's decree requires. They value their Jewish subjects' economic contributions and want to prevent disruption of trade. Practical politics supports moral decisions. Training intensifies as the weeks pass. Young men learn to handle swords and spears. Older men share knowledge of tactics and strategy gained from military service. Women practice with bows and daggers for final defense of their homes. The psychological impact proves as important as physical preparation. Jewish communities stop seeing themselves as helpless victims awaiting slaughter. They become defenders of their families, faith, and future. The shift in mindset transforms everything. Supplies accumulate in hidden storehouses. Food, water, medicine, and weapons gather in synagogues and private homes. If siege comes to their neighborhoods, the Jewish people will be ready to endure and fight back. As winter gives way to spring, the 13th of Adar approaches like a distant storm. But now it carries different meaning for the Jewish people. Instead of the day of their destruction, it might become the day of their victory. The day of reckoning. The 13th day of Adar dawns gray and cold across the Persian Empire. In 127 provinces, Jewish communities wake to face the day they have feared and prepared for during these long months. In Susa, the capital city holds its breath. Streets that usually bustle with morning commerce lie eerily quiet. Shopkeepers remain behind locked doors while families gather in homes and synagogues for final prayers. Mordecai stands at the palace window watching the empty courtyard below. His royal robes cannot hide the tension in his shoulders or the worry in his eyes. Today will prove whether Persian law and Jewish courage can overcome years of hatred. Throughout the empire, the sun rises on communities ready for war. Jewish men grip weapons they never wanted to hold. Women prepare bandages and barricades while trying to comfort frightened children. The elderly offer blessings and share memories of previous survivals. Some enemies of the Jewish people gather in dark alleys and hidden courtyards, whispering plans for attack. Haman's death has not killed the hatred he planted in certain hearts. These men still dream of easy victims and quick profits. But many discover that their intended victims have become formidable opponents. The decree authorizing Jewish self-defense has transformed scattered families into organized defenders. What seemed like simple slaughter now looks like dangerous battle. In the province of Fars, a group of bandits approaches a Jewish village expecting little resistance. Instead, they find walls manned by archers and gates defended by armed men. The surprise attack becomes a costly failure as arrows rain down from rooftops. News of early Jewish victories spreads rapidly along trade routes and message systems. Communities that feared overwhelming attack begin to realize they might actually survive this terrible day. Hope grows stronger with each report of successful defense. Persian officials watch the unfolding events with careful attention. The king's new decree requires them to remain neutral, but many secretly hope to see justice prevail. Haman's corruption had affected the entire administration, creating resentment among honest bureaucrats. In some regions, local governors actively support Jewish communities by providing extra weapons or strategic information. They remember profitable partnerships with Jewish merchants and prefer stability to chaos in their territories. The day's fighting varies greatly across the empire's vast expanse. Some areas see fierce battles as determined enemies test Jewish resolve. Other regions remain peaceful when potential attackers decide the risk outweighs any possible gain. By midday, reports begin reaching the capital from nearby provinces. The Jewish people are not only surviving but winning most encounters. Their preparation and desperation combine into a deadly effectiveness that surprises both friends and enemies. Esther receives updates in her private chambers, each message bringing relief mixed with continued anxiety. Individual victories mean little if the overall pattern favors their enemies. She paces the marble floors, unable to eat or rest, while her people fight for survival. In distant Babylon, the ancient Jewish community faces its greatest challenge since the exile began: Local enemies, emboldened by Haman's original decree, attack the Jewish quarter with overwhelming numbers. The battle rages through narrow streets and around sacred buildings. But years of persecution have taught these Jews to fight with desperate courage. Led by men who remember military service in various armies, they turn their quarter into a fortress. Every rooftop becomes an archer's position, every doorway a defensive strongpoint. As afternoon shadows lengthen, the tide of battle turns decisively. Jewish communities across the empire report victory after victory. Their enemies, expecting easy targets, instead find organized resistance backed by royal authority and divine protection. Some attackers flee when they realize the cost of continued fighting. Others surrender when surrounded by superior Jewish forces. A few fight to the bitter end, driven by hatred stronger than common sense. The Persian postal system carries news of the day's events towards Susa with unprecedented speed. Governors want the king to know immediately how his decree has affected their provinces. The reports paint a picture of justice triumphant over oppression. Regional commanders send their own assessments to the palace. Military professionals, they recognize the skill with which Jewish communities organize their defense. What began as potential rebellion has become legitimate self-protection under royal law. Evening brings an end to most fighting as exhausted combatants on both sides withdraw to count their losses. The day that was meant to destroy the Jewish people has instead demonstrated their strength and determination. In synagogues throughout the empire, communities gather for prayers of thanksgiving. They have survived the worst day in their recent history. Tomorrow, they can begin rebuilding their lives without the shadow of legal destruction hanging over them. The festival of Purim is born. Victory celebrations echo through Jewish communities as the 14th day of Adar brings confirmation of their survival. Messages pour into Susa from every corner of the empire, each one telling the same remarkable story of triumph over seemingly impossible odds. Mordecai sits in his office reviewing reports from provincial governors. The numbers astound even him. Jewish communities have not merely survived, but achieved decisive victories throughout most of the Persian Empire. Their enemies lie dead or scattered, their threat permanently broken. But victory brings new responsibilities. The Jewish people need guidance on how to commemorate their deliverance. Should they simply return to normal life and forget this terrible period? Or should they establish lasting traditions to remember what God accomplished through human courage? Esther joins her cousin in discussions about the future. Both understand that this moment represents more than military victory. The Jewish people have experienced divine rescue in a way that demands lasting memorial. Future generations must know what happened on these crucial days. They decide to establish a new festival celebrating their deliverance from destruction. The holiday will be called Purim, remembering the lots that Haman cast to choose the date for Jewish annihilation. What was meant for evil becomes the foundation for joy. Letters go out immediately to every Jewish community in the empire. Mordecai's authority as the king's vizier ensures these messages receive prompt attention and wide distribution. The instructions are clear and specific, leaving no doubt about expectations. To establish among them that they should keep the 14th day of the month Adar and the 15th day of the same yearly as the days on which the Jews rested from their enemies. The festival will mark both the victory and the peace that followed. The celebration will include specific traditions designed to remember all aspects of their deliverance. Families will feast together, sharing food and joy in thanksgiving for survival. Rich dishes and fine wine will replace the fasting and mourning of recent months. Special attention must be given to the poor and needy during Purim celebrations. Communities will send gifts of food to those who cannot afford their own feasts. This sharing ensures that everyone participates fully in the national rejoicing. Children will hear the story of Esther's courage and Mordecai's wisdom during special gatherings. The tale of the beautiful queen who risked everything to save her people will inspire future generations facing their own challenges. The festival will also remember Haman's downfall as a warning against pride and hatred. His name will be mentioned only to curse it, while the names of Esther and Mordecai receive honor and blessing. Reading the account of these events becomes a central part of Purim observance. Scribes prepare copies of the story for synagogues throughout the empire. The written record will preserve accurate details for centuries to come. Jewish communities respond to Mordecai's letters with enthusiasm and gratitude. The idea of an annual celebration appeals to people who have lived through such darkness and emerged into light. They want to remember both the danger and the deliverance. Preparations begin immediately for the first official Purim celebration. Families plan menus, prepare gifts, and organize community gatherings. The festival of their survival becomes an opportunity for renewed fellowship and shared identity. Some communities add local customs to the basic framework Mordecai established. Regional foods, songs, and traditions enrich the celebration while maintaining its essential meaning. Unity in purpose allows diversity in expression. The timing proves perfect for establishing lasting tradition. The memory of recent terror remains fresh while the joy of salvation feels immediate and real. Both emotions combine to create powerful motivation for annual remembrance. Persian officials observe these Jewish celebrations with interest and some relief. A people celebrating their deliverance makes better subjects than a community nursing grievances. The festival serves imperial stability as well as Jewish identity. King Xerxes approves the establishment of Purim through official recognition in palace records. The holiday becomes part of Persian law, protected by the same royal authority that once threatened Jewish existence. Word spreads beyond Jewish communities as neighbors learn about the new festival. Some non-Jews express interest in joining the celebrations, drawn by themes of justice triumphing over oppression. The message resonates across cultural boundaries. Mordecai and Esther add final details to their festival instructions. The celebration must include elements of joy, charity, community, and remembrance. All four aspects work together to create meaningful annual observance. As the first Purim approaches, anticipation builds in Jewish communities throughout the empire. They have reasons to celebrate that go far beyond mere survival. They have discovered their own strength, experienced divine protection, and gained lasting security in their Persian homeland. The festival they create will outlive the empire that birthed it. Centuries later, Jewish families will still gather on the 14th of Adar to remember the queen who risked everything and the God who turned mourning into dancing. Mordecai's legacy. The palace corridors ring with new sounds as Mordecai settles into his role as second in command of the Persian Empire. Gone are the harsh voices and cruel laughter that echoed during Haman's reign. In their place, fair judgment and honest administration restored dignity to imperial government. Provincial governors quickly learned to respect their new superior. Where Haman demanded bribes and favored corruption, Mordecai insists on justice and honest service. The change spreads through the bureaucracy like fresh air replacing stale atmosphere. Jewish communities throughout the empire benefit from having one of their own in ultimate authority, not through special privileges or unfair advantages, but through the simple assurance that their rights will be protected and their concerns heard by someone who understands their situation. Trade flourishes under Mordecai's efficient administration. Merchants who once feared arbitrary taxation or seizure of goods now conduct business with confidence. The empire's economy grows stronger as fear gives way to predictability and justice. King Xerxes watches his viziers work with growing satisfaction. The man who once saved his life now saves his empire from the corruption that threatened to destroy effective government. Honest administration proves more valuable than gold for building lasting prosperity. Local officials find their jobs easier under the new system. Clear expectations replace confusing demands. Merit matters more than connections. The Persian civil service begins attracting capable administrators instead of mere fortune seekers. Mordecai's influence extends beyond simple administrative reform. His personal example of integrity and wisdom inspires others throughout the government. Young officials model themselves on his patient approach to complex problems. The vizier maintains close contact with Jewish communities while never favoring them unfairly over other groups. His correspondence with synagogue leaders provides guidance on religious matters and practical advice on dealing with local governments. Persian nobles gradually accept their Jewish colleague as an equal. His competence speaks louder than his ancestry. Several powerful families form alliances with Mordecai. recognizing his growing influence and proven abilities. Foreign ambassadors report to their home governments about the empire's new leadership. They describe a more predictable and trustworthy Persian administration under Mordecai's guidance. International relations improve as other nations gain confidence in Persian reliability. The palace library expands under Mordecai's patronage. He commissions copies of important texts and supports scholars working to preserve knowledge. His own experience of near extinction makes him value the importance of maintaining cultural records. Young scribes compete for positions in Mordecai's department. Working for the vizier becomes a mark of distinction and a path to advancement. The quality of government documents improves as skilled writers join the administration. Provincial inspections become regular features of Mordecai's management style. Unlike Haman, who rarely left the capital, the new vizier travels extensively to observe conditions firsthand. His presence encourages honest local administration. Tax collection becomes more efficient and less oppressive under the new system. Mordecai eliminates many of the arbitrary fees that Haman had imposed for personal enrichment. Revenue actually increases as trade expands under fairer policies. The empire's military commanders respect Mordecai's strategic thinking and administrative support. He ensures their units receive proper supplies and equipment without the delays and corruption that plagued Haman's tenure. Religious tolerance becomes an unofficial policy of the Persian government. While maintaining official support for traditional Persian beliefs, Mordecai's administration avoids the religious persecution that had characterized previous periods. Jewish learning experiences a renaissance as communities feel secure enough to establish schools and academies. The study of law, history, and religion flourishes under the protection of Mordecai's authority. Other minority groups within the empire observe these changes with hope. If Jews can achieve such acceptance and success, perhaps other persecuted communities might also find paths to security and prosperity. Mordecai's personal story becomes legendary throughout the empire. From exile to vizier, from potential victim to powerful protector, his life demonstrates that merit and divine favor can overcome any obstacle. The King's Chronicles record Mordecai's achievements in detail. His reforms and successes become part of official Persian history. Future rulers will study his methods as examples of effective governance. Years pass, and Mordecai's reputation only grows stronger. He becomes known throughout the ancient world as a symbol of wisdom in leadership and justice in administration. His influence shapes Persian policy long after his initial appointment. The Jewish people prosper under his protection while maintaining their distinct identity and traditions. They achieve the delicate balance of full participation in Persian society without losing their unique heritage and faith. Mordecai's legacy extends far beyond his own lifetime. The administrative systems he establishes continue serving the empire for generations. The precedent of Jewish participation in government opens doors for future leaders from his community. His story inspires other minority groups throughout the ancient world. Proof that outsiders can achieve acceptance and success through merit encourages talented individuals who might otherwise remain hidden in their communities. The Persian Empire itself benefits immeasurably from Mordecai's service. His reforms strengthen the administration, improve economic conditions, and enhance international reputation. The empire reaches new heights of prosperity and stability under his guidance. Esther's final years. Queen Esther's chambers overlook the palace gardens, where cypress trees stand like silent guardians against the morning sky. Years have passed since that terrifying night when she risked everything to save her people, yet the memories remain as vivid as yesterday. Her role has evolved from desperate advocate to respected counselor. King Xerxes values her wisdom on matters both personal and political. The woman who once trembled before approaching the throne now sits confidently beside it during important discussions. The royal court has adapted to having a Jewish queen whose faith shapes her decisions. Esther never hides her beliefs, yet she presents them in ways that build bridges rather than walls. Her example encourages tolerance throughout the palace. Persian noble families seek marriages with Jewish households, recognizing the community's growing influence and prosperity. What once seemed like dangerous association now appears advantageous for ambitious families seeking political advancement. Esther maintains correspondence with Jewish communities throughout the empire. Her letters offer encouragement, practical advice, and occasional assistance for those facing local difficulties. The queen's protection extends far beyond the palace walls. Young Jewish women throughout the provinces look to Esther as proof that their heritage need not limit their aspirations. Her story inspires countless girls to pursue education and develop their talents rather than simply accepting traditional limitations. The queen establishes charitable foundations using her vast wealth from Haman's confiscated estate. These funds support education, healthcare, and economic development in Jewish communities while also helping other needy groups throughout the empire. Royal banquets now include Jewish customs and foods alongside Persian traditions. Esther's influence gradually enriches the court's cultural life while demonstrating that diversity strengthens rather than threatens established institutions. Palace scribes record Esther's sayings and decisions for inclusion in royal archives. Her wisdom in handling delicate situations becomes part of the official guidance available to future queens and administrators. The king often seeks Esther's counsel on matters involving religious or ethnic minorities. Her perspective helps him understand how royal policies affect ordinary people in distant provinces. Government becomes more responsive to citizen needs. Esther's marriage remains strong despite the pressures of royal life. She and Xerxes develop genuine partnership based on mutual respect and shared commitment to justice. Their relationship becomes a model for other royal couples. Foreign ambassadors quickly learn to include Esther in their diplomatic calculations. Her influence with the king makes her support valuable for achieving favorable agreements. International negotiations often depend on winning the queen's approval. The palace library expands its collection of Jewish texts under Esther's patronage. Scholars translate important works into Persian and other languages, making Jewish wisdom available to broader audiences throughout the empire. Esther never bears children, but she adopts several orphaned Jewish girls and ensures they receive excellent educations. These young women carry her influence into the next generation, spreading her values throughout Persian society. Religious leaders from various communities seek audiences with the queen to discuss their concerns and aspirations. Esther becomes an unofficial mediator, helping resolve conflicts between different groups while maintaining imperial unity. The queen's personal courage during the crisis becomes legendary throughout the ancient world. Stories of the beautiful queen who risked death to save her people inspire literature, songs, and artistic works across many cultures. Esther ages gracefully, her beauty enhanced rather than diminished by wisdom and experience. The frightened young woman who once hid her identity transforms into a confident leader whose judgment commands respect throughout the empire. Her influence on Persian culture proves lasting and significant. Jewish ideas about justice, charity, and human dignity become integrated into imperial policies. The empire becomes more humane under her gentle guidance. Palace servants and officials develop deep loyalty to their queen. Her kindness to subordinates and fair treatment of all people creates an atmosphere of mutual respect rarely found in royal courts. Esther's faith remains central to her identity throughout her years as queen. She maintains Jewish practices while adapting them to royal circumstances. Her example shows that religious devotion and public service can strengthen each other. The queen's diplomatic skills prove especially valuable during international crises. Her ability to find common ground between opposing viewpoints helps the empire maintain peaceful relations with neighboring powers. As years accumulate, Esther begins planning for succession and the continuation of her reforms. She trains younger women in the arts of leadership and politics, ensuring that her influence will outlive her own active participation in government. Persian historians begin writing accounts of Esther's reign while she still lives. They recognize that her story represents a turning point in the empire's treatment of minorities and the role of women in government. The queen's later years bring the satisfaction of seeing her people prosper and her values take root throughout Persian society. The frightened girl who became queen through circumstances beyond her control leaves behind a legacy of courage, wisdom, and compassion. Outro and Legacy of Esther. The scroll closes on one of history's most remarkable stories of courage, conquering fear, wisdom overcoming hatred, and divine providence working through human bravery. Esther's tale echoes across centuries, speaking to every generation that faces seemingly impossible challenges. In synagogues around the world, families still gather each year when Adar arrives to remember the queen who risked everything. Children hear how a young woman's faith and courage saved an entire people from destruction. The festival of Purim keeps her memory alive through celebration and storytelling. The lessons of Esther's story transcend any single culture or time period. Her example speaks to anyone who has felt powerless in the face of injustice or wondered whether individual action can make a difference against overwhelming odds. She proves that ordinary people can achieve extraordinary things when they find the courage to act. Modern readers find relevant themes throughout her narrative: the abuse of power, the danger of hatred left unchecked, the importance of speaking truth to authority, and the value of cultural diversity all resonate in contemporary society. Her story remains as current as today's headlines. Esther's identity crisis speaks to countless people who struggle to balance competing loyalties or feel caught between different worlds. Her journey from hidden identity to proud advocacy offers hope to those who fear revealing their true selves might cost them everything they have gained. The Queen's strategic wisdom provides timeless lessons in leadership and diplomacy. She demonstrates how patience, timing, and careful preparation can overcome seemingly impossible obstacles. Her methods teach that intelligence often succeeds where force fails. Her relationship with Mordecai illustrates the power of mentorship and mutual support. Their partnership shows how different generations can work together, combining youthful energy with mature wisdom to achieve goals neither could accomplish alone. The reversal of fortune that characterizes Esther's story has inspired countless other narratives throughout world literature. The theme of justice ultimately triumphing over oppression speaks to fundamental human hopes for fairness and meaning in existence. Religious communities across traditions find inspiration in Esther's example of faith under pressure. Her willingness to risk everything for her beliefs encourages others facing persecution or discrimination. She shows that spiritual conviction can provide strength for political action. Women throughout history have looked to Esther as proof that female leadership can be both effective and morally grounded. Her combination of beauty, intelligence, and courage challenges stereotypes, while demonstrating that different types of strength can all serve important purposes. The Persian Empire that provided the setting for Esther's story eventually fell to other powers, but her influence continues. The precedent she established for minority participation in government and the protection of religious freedom helped shape later civilizations. Scholars debate various aspects of Esther's story, but its central message remains clear and powerful. When people of conscience choose to act despite personal risk, they can change the course of history. Individual decisions matter in ways that extend far beyond immediate consequences. The arts have drawn repeatedly on Esther's story for inspiration. Paintings, sculptures, operas, plays, and films have retold her tale for new audiences. Each generation finds fresh meaning in her ancient example of courage under pressure. Educational institutions use Esther's story to teach lessons about leadership, ethics, and social responsibility. Her example demonstrates how personal integrity and public service can reinforce each other rather than creating irreconcilable conflicts. Modern Israel includes Purim among its national holidays, connecting contemporary Jewish identity with ancient memories of survival and triumph. The queen, who lived in Persian exile, continues inspiring a people who have returned to their ancestral homeland. Holocaust survivors and their descendants find particular meaning in Esther's story of rescue from attempted genocide. Her example provides both historical precedent and spiritual comfort for those whose families faced similar threats in more recent times. Civil rights movements around the world have drawn inspiration from Esther's willingness to challenge unjust systems. Her strategic approach to creating change through legal and political channels offers alternatives to purely confrontational methods. The annual reading of Esther's story during Purim celebrations maintains its power to surprise and inspire. Even people who know the ending find themselves moved by her courage and amazed by the dramatic reversals that characterize her narrative. Interfaith dialogue often uses Esther's story as common ground between different religious traditions. Her themes of justice, courage, and divine providence resonate across theological boundaries while respecting particular beliefs and practices. The queen's legacy ultimately rests not in the wealth she accumulated or the power she wielded, but in the lives she saved and the examples she set. Her story proves that history belongs not only to the mighty, but also to the brave, not only to the powerful, but also to the faithful. As long as people face difficult choices between safety and conscience, between personal comfort and public responsibility, Esther's story will continue speaking to human hearts. The young woman who became a queen and saved a nation reminds us all that we are capable of far more than we imagine when we find the courage to act on our deepest convictions. The scroll may close, but the story continues wherever people choose courage over fear, wisdom over hatred, and hope over despair. Esther's legacy lives on in every act of moral bravery, every stand for justice, and every refusal to let evil have the final word.